you feeling stuck making minimum payments on your credit card debt? SaveWithConrad.com can help, and you don't need perfect credit or money out of your pocket to do this. NMLS number 65084, equal housing lender. Oh, and did I mention no house payments for 2 months? Get rid of your credit card debt and lower your monthly payments right now at SaveWithConrad.com.
Hey, race fans, Hall of Famer Darrell Waltrip here. You know it's time to drop the green flag on another edition of Leaning Right and Turning Left with Sadler and the Senator, powered by Pace-O-Matic. So, hey, pull those belts tight one more time. Here's my buddy Hermie Sadler and Senator Bill Stanley. Boogity, boogity, boogity. Let's see what they have to say, boys and girls.
I'm Virginia State Senator Bill Stanley, and I'm leaning right.
And I'm former NASCAR driver and Fox Sports Analyst Hermie Sadler, and I am turning left, leaning right and turning left with Sadler and the Senator, powered by Pace-O-Matic.
Hey, Hermie.
What are you doing, buddy?
Man, I'm sitting here with you, which I always like better than, when we do it by TV or remote or Zoom or whatever, because you know what? The chances of Brad Tuesday, our executive producer, screwing it up are minimized, or at least we can yell at him from both positions here. Yeah. Like last week's, we had a little bit of a problem with our internet there at the mothership, the Stanley Law Group, and then we had to come back in.
Fault.
It's always his fault.
That could have been your fault for maybe not getting to the highest level of internet service available, or...
Well, yeah, but I'd still blame Chad. I mean, that's why you hire people, so you can blame him for what you do wrong.
Chad, right? On this episode, I'm here for you. I'm here for you.
Well, if it's not
because later in the show, we will have a discussion. I turned Senator Stanley loose by himself for one weekend to go, quote unquote, take care of Sadler Stanley Racing at the racetrack, and you will not want to miss the update.
You put me in charge
from Dominion Speedway.
Yeah, I'm a better lawyer, and maybe I can run this podcast. But I think I'm going to leave the racing team stuff to you from here on out.
No. You want to.
No.
You want it all.
No.
You want to do it all.
No. Yeah. Well, I learned a lot.
I bet you did.
Human relationships, racing.
The funny thing about you is, as a legislator and as an attorney, you are focused and nobody can get to you. You're resolute and you're confident in your position. And then when you get to the racetrack, it's like whoever talks to you last is what we need to do. It's like,
that's kind of true.
Yeah. Whoever comes by, and it could be somebody from the stands sitting on row 17, seat D, somebody that's just showed up, took a wrong turn, ended up at the racetrack, and it could say, Senator, you ought to get so-and-so to drive your race car. He'll call me. Hermie, we got to get so-and-so to drive the race car.
That's kind of true, too.
Yeah.
But, I realized your presence has a big difference on and off the track.
But the good news is you able to keep Mr. Excitement out of jail.
I was able to make sure that he did not have to be bonded out like Shep Moss usually does.
Yeah.
But he was a center of the excitement there. We'll talk about it later. I mean, it had spread and grown. What actually happened grew into a size that even people outside the track who weren't even in there had heard about it. Mm-hmm. And by the time basically that
all I was trying to do was take one weekend off to get my daughter married. And here y'all go.
Yeah, well, there's always, we get this week off though. So you get to regroup and then we go to
here y'all go.
Motor Mile.
Mm-hmm. We're going to do leaning right and turning left, but the guest on the show today is already one of my all-time favorite people, and I know after this interview will be one of your all-time favorite people. And how many times have I said on this podcast, the greatest asset or the greatest thing I take from my life of being on the road on the NASCAR, it's called circuit, but I call it circus. The NASCAR circus is my old friend Kyle Petty. He is a member of racing royalty in NASCAR. If you obviously follow anything about NASCAR, you know and love the name Petty. So I got a chance to not only race with Kyle, but work many, many years of TV with Kyle. And he's just there's not another person on the planet like Kyle Petty.
Yeah, and if you liked him on TV, liked him racing or being a commentator for racing, get his book, Kyle Petty, Swerve or Die. I read it cover to cover. It takes a lot of time for me to be able to read a whole book, but it's in his voice. It's a really deep dive into his thoughts, not just the history and the stories, but it was a fantastic book. It really is, and I hope we talk a little bit about it. I hope everybody goes out and gets it. It's a good read. It's a quick read, but it's an amazing story from start to finish, and so I had a lot more respect and of this man than I did even before, and I had a lot before. So hope to talk to him about that. But it's a really great book. Again, Kyle Petty, Swerve or Die. What an amazing getting him on the show. That's, of course, your talent. It's demonstrating to me that after going to the race this past weekend, that maybe this relationship, although on paper that I wrote is 50-50, perhaps it's 57-43. Might be 60-40. I'm not trying to get there yet, but clearly,
well, I had a lot. You gave me a lot to think about. You've only changed your mind 17 times in the last 2.5 weeks on what you think is the proper direction for the race team. So that's why I'm gonna start bonding with Chad a little bit more. We're gonna start getting together and throwing you a bunch of ideas weekly on the podcast. How we think, who we need, what we need to do, maybe change things around, maybe, just throw a bunch of shit up against the wall, just see what happens,
Well, that's what we do anyway.
Yeah.
So it's not new for
No,
Chad. But he might have a more intelligent person doing it this time.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
well, now, Gina Reinhardt from Pace-O-Matic told me you were going to arrive at the racetrack about 1 o'clock on Saturday, but you didn't show up.
we had a little confusion.
I mean, I thought you were going to be there. What time?
I had planned to be at the race until just the last minute.
Where were you?
I had a last minute. Well, I had an ingrown toenail.
Ooh, those can be painful.
And, one thing led to another. And you ever seen the movie Stripes?
Yes.
John Candy, when he's trying to explain why they were in the bar with the Bud Wrestling, he says, one thing led to another. The directions got all fouled up there. And when he's explaining it to Sergeant Holker. That's true.
Uncle Holker.
Yeah. While, but.
Lighten up there, Francis.
Actually, and I'm not sure Gina ever actually got it, but my daughter got married this weekend.
What?
Yeah.
Gina didn't know that.
She didn't.
Obviously.
Well,
we're making a joke because we go on these weekly calls about the race team.
And Gina's great, by the way.
And she is great. And for about a month, Gina kept thinking you were going to be at this race.
Yeah.
And of course, the wedding takes precedent, barely. But she go, okay, so Hermie.
But I made a big mistake by staying at my daughter's wedding.
And we'll get into
and
that
not being
a
at the racetrack.
Yeah, well, yeah. Oh, you're talking about me again, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, maybe. But so we would make jokes, and I would sit there and go on the, even though Hermie, she go, okay, Hermie, are you coming to the meet and greets? Because we had a couple meet and greets before, and he go, Gina, like I told you 2 weeks ago, my daughter's getting married. I can't be there.
Yeah.
Her wedding is on Saturday. Oh, okay. And so then I'd pipe in and go, so what time are you going to be at the race, Hermie, on that Saturday? And he would get, Hermie gets.
Well, I missed y'all, but we had a great time.
You too. We obviously missed you too.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry I didn't make the race because you assigned me this horrible task of overseeing the operations of Sadler Stanley Racing. So, and I feel like I don't think I failed you, but clearly I could have done a better job. I
call it an epic failure.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I had a political fundraiser there too. That at least that was successful, and we sold about $600 worth of Sadler Stanley merch.
When you go to the racetrack and you get a DNF,
right, blow an engine,
your crew chief / team manager and the promoter of the series, director of the series, need security. I mean,
There was
not sure how far we need to go, but that's not a great race report.
Just a teaser. There may or may not have been one of those police helicopters with, the big spotlight flying in a circle overhead, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah.
But tell me a little bit about the wedding. How'd it go? I mean, you had a big crowd.
Man, it was awesome. It was awesome. First and foremost, we were very blessed with the wedding. It was an outdoor
Beautiful weekend.
wedding. Yeah, the whole weekend. The weather was great. It wasn't too hot. We had a rehearsal and then rehearsal dinner on Friday night. And Saturday morning, mid-morning, all the guys in the wedding and myself. And we had back in 2010, 2011, we had an exchange student from Serbia live with us for 2 years. And we hadn't seen him since he graduated high school here in 2011. He flew back from Serbia to come to Cora's wedding.
Oh, wow.
His name is Andrea Stojsavljevic.
Say that again.
Andrea Stojsavljevic.
Spelling?
Yeah, no, can't do that.
Country of origin?
Yeah.
Can you use that in a sentence?
He's from Europe.
Like a spelling bee.
But so to have all those people there, and I got to tell you, Cameron and Cora both have great friends, people in the wedding. It was awesome. And then, we had the ceremony and great reception, and Cora threw me a curveball a little bit. We had been through the ceremony, and were in the barn getting ready to be introduced into the reception. And Cora comes up to me and says, "Just so you're not caught off guard, after mine and your dance, stay on the dance floor. I got a surprise for you." I'm like, "Oh, some woman jumping out of a cake car."
Yeah, a new car?
Yeah, something. But she had decided she wanted Haley and I to have a dance as well, which really is emotional, for me. And anyway, so we, of course, Haley hears it, and the whole time we're waiting to be introduced, she says, "Haley, no dance for Haley," all that. But so I said, "Okay, we don't have to dance, but when they called her name, which she's very uncomfortable in big open areas like that anyway.
Right.
But she came on out there and we danced. And so that was outside of all the stuff with Cora, that was a special moment. But we had a great time, and, a lot of great friends showed up, and
Shep Moss was there?
Shep Moss was not there. He chose to go work at he's a DJ. Mm-hmm. So what I did, Shep, Party Time Music, when Cora and I were going over her invite list, we talked about Shep, and we talked about whether or not to book him as a DJ for the ceremony. And I said, don't book him to work, because let's just invite him so they can come enjoy the wedding. Mm-hmm. And Shep chose to take another booking somewhere else.
You should have booked him as the DJ.
So I should have booked him as a DJ.
Yeah, you should have maybe had me as the charge of security or the golf cart, and that I would have missed the race and nothing would have gotten screwed up with the team.
So, that had that. But we had, look, I'm going to tell you what, it was great. My dad's been under the weather, but he was able to, to do all his stuff, be there. Angie's parents were both there. Bunch of people from the NASCAR community, a bunch of my friends from my UNC days, Governor Allen and Susan were there. We just so many.
You had some wrestlers too, didn't you?
Yeah.
Double J,
Jeff Jarrett, and Karen and Cody came in. They stayed with us at the house a couple nights.
Don't you have a Cody story with regard to your schnoz? Your beak?
Those of you see me this week, I'm not certain my nose is not broken. I haven't checked it yet.
It looks.
But we had during the day Saturday, after the boy, we shot skeets for a while in the morning. We set up a little thing across the road and shot skeets all day. The boys had a great time. So then we went back, and Andrea, the kid I mentioned from Serbia, played basketball. That's why he was here to play as an exchange student to play basketball. So after that, he wanted to go up to Elliott's and shoot basketball. So we ended up having some 2-on-2 and some 3-on-3 basketball games Saturday afternoon prior to the wedding that night. And so we're playing, everybody's having a good time, whatever. But the ball went out of bounds, and I turned around just to walk back onto the court, and Wyatt Elliot's little boy, who I love, was throwing the ball to me for me to take it back out of bounds, and I turned around and never saw it coming, and the ball hit me right in the face, right on top of my glasses.
Ate it right in the nose.
Right in the nose.
Uh-huh.
And
And ladies and gentlemen, if I can describe for you what it looks like right now, I'm told. Oh my goodness!
take my glasses off is worse.
So you know what that looks like? You know, like if you get into let's say you join the Navy when you're 18, and then you're like 65 or 70, and that tattoo that was very cheap and gotten in Taiwan has turned to purpley mush.
Yeah.
On your arm. That's about what it looks like.
And
I mean, he got you good right on the bridge of the nose.
Yeah. So and then I showed you a video earlier. Jeff Jarrett and Karen and their son Cody. Cody's a special kid in a lot of ways.
Wait a minute. How old is Wyatt?
Wyatt is 13.
Oh, so we can't sue him.
Yeah.
We could make some money off this.
Yeah.
Some of that Elliot Sadler money we're talking.
Yeah. Good luck. Jeff and Karen came and brought Cody, who I have a special relationship with Cody. He's special to me, kind of like Haley is. But every time I'm in Cody's presence, we have to wrestle. That's just, we have to wrestle. And those matches always end with him kicking me in the nuts.
Really?
That ends, manscaped or not.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. The pain is the same. And so
some crop preserver would like
Cody,
dull the pain.
I give him credit. Cody made it through the ceremony with his little buttoned-up shirt and pants. Mm-hmm. But by the time we got to the reception, he had put his pajamas on. But he came on to the reception with his pajamas on, which I thought was great.
Yeah.
So the reception's going on. There's 1,000 people there, this, that, and the other. And Cody says, "You ready for a match?"
And you were still in your finery, right?
I had my tux on.
Yeah.
So we went over to the front patio area of the barn and proceeded to have about a 10 or 12 minute match.
Saw some video.
Karen shot some of the footage for that.
Saw that.
So now we have a rematch. Cody was able to come out on top at the wedding.
Wrestling is clearly in his blood.
So next month, I'm going back out to Nashville for the Michael and Darrell Waltrip charity weekend. Week. It's during the week. Charity events, the fundraiser and the dinner and stuff at the Country Music Hall of Fame and all that. So when I go out there, I'll stay with Jeff and Karen and Cody, and we'll have a rematch. We always wrestle at the Jarrett residence on the trampoline out back. And Cody's already been sending me emails. He's already so far told me he's got Steve Austin, Samoa Joe, Mankind, 4 or 5 other people that he's already got coming to be in his corner.
Ooh.
And it's going to be tables, ladders, and chairs.
Ooh.
Hardcore, falls count anywhere.
Cage match? Octagon?
Well, the trampoline is kind of an octagon, so you could say that.
Wow. Will this be filmed
So
pay-per-view?
the deck
Flow
will be-
Racing,
the
Flow
deck-
Sports?
The deck will be stacked against me.
Any choreography beforehand with Jeff?
No. Oh, we don't do the choreography mess. We go right
That's
at
the word
it.
he uses
No,
all the time when he's on the show.
Cody and I, we go right to it.
Is that right?
Right to it.
Will there be filming that we can all watch
Oh,
later?
sure. Oh, there'll be multiple outlets.
Will Caesars be accepting bets?
Yeah, bet on Cody
Wagering?
because he's going to kick me in the balls.
Really?
It's just a matter of when.
This segment brought to you by Manscaped.
Yeah.
Protecting the family jewels, even with Manscaped.
This is a good time for me to mention that Pace-O-Matic is an entertainment company which develops gaming software that players love to play and can use their skills to win every single time. Plus, these games of skill provide vital revenue to keep family-owned businesses like bars, restaurants, and convenience stores thriving. And before we get to the leaning right, you and I are together in Richmond to start our preparation and strategy to go back to court.
That's right.
In November.
Yes, sir.
So give a quick kind of review version of what we plan to accomplish here for the next couple of days.
Well, we're in an undisclosed location.
Yep.
So that we can prepare without any interference or any eyes of prying. We've got, I've put together what I think is a legal dream team, a good team of lawyers and other consultants that we utilize, especially when you've got a case like this that's that important, not just to you, Hermie, but to so many small businesses throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. We're getting together, and this is the first stage of planning where we kind of map out the strategy of where we think we should go. We'll have another meeting that that will actually run through the court, what we call moot court, where we actually run through our direct examination, anticipated cross on our witnesses, and then try to think about what their witnesses are going to say and get our testimony and our witness testimony and exhibits together, put them in order, use audiovisual aids and assistance for the court, for the other side, and then we anticipate what the other side's going to do. And it looks like the other side is kind of cuddled up. That is the Attorney General's office, the Commonwealth of Virginia. The governor, unfortunately, and the ABC are kind of cuddling up with the casinos right now. And it looks like the casinos are feeding them expert witnesses and perhaps other things to try to persuade the court that the latest iteration of the skill game ban, of course, we beat the skill game ban and have a temporary injunction right now. We're hoping that will be permanent, but they've then changed the criminal law entirely, again, through the budget, a backdoor after midnight smoky backroom deal. They accuse skill games of being gray machines and their definitions because they came in through the back door, when in fact they did not. That was one of the other lies that they kept telling. Gray machines and the operators and most especially the manufacturers like Pacematic went to county Commonwealth's attorneys. First, they went and got an opinion from the ABC that this was not a game of chance, it was a game of skill. Then they went to each county and said, is this okay? Can we have some of our operators operate these games in your counties? And those counties that said yes, they did, and did so responsibly. And those that said no, they didn't. But here was the casinos slipping in through the budget, and we've talked about it before, but if you're listening to the podcast, for the first time, we're engaged in a lawsuit for small business fighting against government overreach in the casinos. We're trying to eliminate all competition as they come in and create this new industry in Virginia. And so what we're doing right now is we're going to get together kind of like in a skull session, chalk talk, and work out where we think we need to be to close the door finally on Senate Bill 971, which we've gotten that preliminary injunction, and also the new language, which is equally as offensive and unconstitutional in my mind. Now we have to prove it. I've always learned from an old attorney that I worked for, Gil Davis. We've talked about him in the past. He always used to say to me, Bill, that it's not what you know that matters. It's what you can prove. And so we take that very seriously in the preparation of this court case. You're intimately involved. That's why you're here. We're here for the next 2 days in a large conference room, hammering out what we think, debating. You've been there before like we did the first time. It's really important to kind of understand and get a consensus on where we're going to go. And we've got some heavy hitters on our legal team. And we're bringing on more heavy hitters on our legal team. We've got Rod Smola, who is a constitutional expert, dean of a very prestigious law school, helping us as a part of our legal team. We may bring in another constitutional scholar. I think we are. We've got other people that we want to bring as witnesses so that the court has a full hearing on what the facts are and what the law is.
We also have
how it should be.
Not to be named on the podcast potential legislator that has reached out and may want to be on the team because as part of this process, the General Assembly put legislators, people like you, in an awkward position, a bad position,
right,
of having to basically either vote yes or no on the entire budget that included this language that was stuck in with no debate, no questions, no legislative process. But it's interesting. I'll get you one more comment, and then we'll move to the leaning right moment. But the first time we went to court, it was just the two attorneys from the Attorney General's office. I don't think they thought we would ever even go to court. I think they thought they'd get our case kicked out. I know they filed demurs and did these other, tried to move it to Richmond. Anything they could do. Not answer
discovery.
I think they just thought it would go away or it would get squashed or wiped out, or it's so many, they're so powerful.
Yeah.
It's
the power of the government.
So I don't think they ever thought we would actually have a real day in court, much less win a temporary injunction for operators all across the Commonwealth of Virginia to be able to legally and rightfully operate their games. But it was just them two. So now every time I get an email, now it's the AG's office is added another layer, more people, more witnesses, more testimony, so they are really going about it a different way. And to your point, I hadn't really thought about it that way, but it sounds like, in my opinion, that, you know, they are leaning on the casinos to try to help feed them information on what they should be looking for, or what, you know, how to try to fight, or whatever the case may be. So I've said it before and I'll say it again. It's just sad that our Commonwealth of Virginia, and at least some legislators in the General Assembly, are quite simply choosing casinos over small businesses.
Yeah, and it's growing pretty obvious. And again, I wouldn't let the casinos come in and run my litigation if I was Attorney General. You know, this is a Virginia law. This is a Virginia issue. It shall be decided by Virginians, and I don't need your help. But It's the same way, Hermie, as when our budget writers, 5 or 6 people in a back room, decided to insert budget language to try to ban skill games in another way because they weren't successful with the first piss poor way they wrote Senate Bill 971. So they put in this other piss poor stuff. It's the same thing because they're being led by casinos. This industry is demonstrating that they have a control over branches of our government, legislatively and perhaps in the executive branch, in the lifers, maybe not Jason Miyares, but the people that work in government. You're talking about a lot of people that have come over from law firms that represent the casinos that are now working in the Attorney General's office. It's kind of baked into the cake a little bit, and it's unfortunate. But, you know, I think they also saw what we did in the last hearing, the last trial, where for 6.5 hours we brought witness after witness and demonstrated with demonstrative evidence, with exhibits, exactly why this was unconstitutional and unfair, and the court ruled our way. It seems also clear to me that they are allowing the casinos to direct their litigation. So we've got to think like casinos when we're getting ready in these 2 days of meetings.
You know, you didn't tell me this. Nobody's told me this. This is what my opinion has been, because since we started this lawsuit, obviously there's a new governor and there's a new attorney general.
Right.
I've just kind of always felt that the governor and the attorney general, they could not just come in and get involved and like make a ruling or pick one side or the other. My feeling all along when it comes to the governor and attorney general was they just needed to let it play out, and then they could guide, you know, something or you know, come in at the appropriate time. I think I wouldn't expect either one of them to come in and try to make a deal, so to speak.
Yeah.
So that's I've been kind of like, okay, they're going to stay neutral until, you know, let's see if we can get it worked out and get it back to the General Assembly. So that's kind of the benefit of the doubt that I've been given. So it is very disappointing to know or to see in front of our own very eyes that the casinos and their lobbyists and their attorneys and all that are kind of getting access to the AG's office.
And I'm hearing even charitable.
Yeah.
You know, it's, you know, I guess we're all just piled up. These people are all against us because what we were able to achieve in court is something that they don't have.
Right.
The casino doesn't have the monopoly anymore. Charitable's wings were clipped by casinos this year in legislation that was passed that basically pairs them back to where they were before. And so now they've got this unholy alliance because we're now the singular source of the ire and their anger, and the casinos wish to dominate. So it is what it is. Look, we were the underdog before. We remain the underdog. Again, we're fighting for small business. I'll tell you this. Every single casino operator or owner or board of directors member never thought we'd win. The members of the lobbyists, the chattering class as we call them, never thought we had a chance. No one thought we had a chance. The legislators, they laugh at us. Giggled. Stanley and Hermie and your game of folly. And then all of a sudden, when we win, well, here they come out of the shadows. You saw that in the Supreme Court appeal.
Yep.
With those that wrote Friends of the Court briefs trying to get the judge's ruling, Judge Lerner's ruling, overturned. Yeah. Guess who came out? Churchill Downs, Rosie's, the casinos, Janet Howe, he who shall not be named but leads my caucus. Amazing.
Yeah.
And on top of that, then they started saying, well, it's home cooking because it's Greensville. It's home cooking. Then they tried to change what happened in the narrative because they couldn't explain how we could have won, how the Constitution could win. And so then they were saying, oh, the judge is really old. Oh, he likes Stanley. I mean, unbelievable. You could not imagine what you'd hear, and quite frankly, was such disrespect to the court, who listened to every single ounce of that evidence and made a reasonable determination. Even if he had made a determination against us at that time, he considered every piece of evidence either way. And so they made every bit of excuse to say that we didn't deserve the victory. It was home cooking, when the judge that's presiding in this case may be in Greensville County, but he's not from Greensville County. He's retired.
All the local judges recused.
Correct. Yeah. So any single excuse that they could have made of how we got this first phase done, they have utilized. And I think it's an embarrassment for Virginia that people who supposedly say they love Virginia are coming in and start new industries in Virginia, or who represent clients in Virginia as lobbyists, would disparage a court of law like they did. I mean, it really was embarrassing. And shame on them for it. So, this is what we head into. We're confident about what we're doing, and not only closing the door on Senate Bill 971, like I said before, but also this new language is also unconstitutional. Ultimately, what I'm getting, though, and I'll tell you just generally, from a lot of legislators, and more than a handful have reached out to me and said, we need to tax and regulate this. A lot of the convenience store owners, restaurant and bar owners, truck stop owners,
which, by the way, is what we've wanted from the beginning.
Exactly. And they're now rising up and they're calling and they're saying, keep it. And the people that play these games. And so they're recognizing, wait a minute, this isn't a good policy. This is not sound policy. And we have one very prominent legislator who I had a long talk with, and that legislator is going to be introducing reasonable tax and regulate on skill games, and good for it. And quite frankly, we should have had that debate last year. We should not have allowed casino interest to enter into it. It should have been a fair debate from the people, by the people, for the people. We should have had people, instead of being crammed into a budget, should have had people come before the dais of a committee and say, I'm for it, or I'm against it, and here's why. And then from that debate, speaking to their legislators, and then have a vigorous debate on the floor of the Senate or the House, and then to make that determination that no, we didn't do that. We did it under the cover of darkness. They, 5 people who write the budget, in the back room, and said to every legislator who they ran back here to the Capitol to vote on this budget because they were so late in getting it out, and we were close to the deadline of July 1st when all our localities need that money to plan their budgets to execute what they do at the local level, they basically hamstrung everybody. You have to vote for this. You can't debate this. It's all or nothing. And here's where we are. And oh, by the way, here's some insidious language about skill games. And look, we know there's a court case going on in a court of law. We know that we're not supposed to legislate through the budget. We know we're not supposed to interfere with cases when they're ongoing, but we did it anyway. And who's the bad guy? Not skill games, not the operator of skill games, not the bar or restaurant owner that depends on them, or the convenience store owner who's fighting inflation and the rising of gas prices, and who's trying to keep their employees paid, as we now pay them $11 an hour or better plus benefits, and they can't find workers. This is the lifeline right now. And you see, as we're going into inflation happening and stagnation, and we're going to see a downturn in the economy, the robust collection of revenues through taxes in the Commonwealth of Virginia, I think, has hit the high water mark. And this has a real good source of revenue that we can do so much, fixing our schools, helping people break the cycle of poverty. There's so many things. We can fill holes in our budget that will probably occur. And instead, it's a political game driven by a large out-of-state interest. And we're finding legislators and maybe some lifer bureaucrats in other branches of government are at the behest of them, and that's sad. So you know what that means, Hermie? We got to go kick some ass.
We got to go kick some ass. And I feel compelled to say this every time we talk about this subject. There's already been referendums. Casinos are coming to Virginia. No problem.
The door has opened and they've gone right through it.
All we are saying is fairly tax and regulate these skill games in the appropriate small businesses so they can make additional revenue, and so can the Commonwealth of Virginia, so can the localities the games are operated in. The casinos can do their thing. I mean, they're the behemoth. They're the giant anyway. But
Did you see the numbers come out again on the casino in Bristol?
Yeah.
Record breaking. And guess what? Record breaking, even though because they tried to shut down skill games and created this confusion, there's been a huge proliferation before December 1st when we got the skill games turned back on of illegal gaming. There are kiosks and gaming parlors around Bristol that are running VGT's video game terminals, games of chance, underworld illegal stuff, and they're still breaking records.
Yes. That is the one thing that nobody will talk about from the General Assembly is the fact that they had tunnel vision so bad about banning these games through SB 971. Nobody took 5 seconds to think about, another part of banning these games is taking away oversight from the ABC, which, by the way, was doing a tremendous job.
They were
doing it. As they testified at our last hearing, no trouble, no problems. It wasn't very cumbersome. People paid their taxes, but they took away that oversight from ABC. And who lost? The legal operators. Who won? The illegal operators. They have which is why, another reason why I do not understand why the big bad casino boys won't just come sit down at a table. We deserve, Senator Stanley, a seat at the table. We deserve to be heard. We deserve that part of our business that we've had. And I still am hopeful, although to this point, the casino people have shown no signs of doing anything other than trying to use their money, power, and influence to have ultimate total control of the whole industry across the Commonwealth.
Yep.
I hope they'll come sit at the table and say, what's fair for y'all, skill games? What's fair for y'all, charitable? What's fair for us? And then how can we all work together to clean up the illegal stuff? That's really where we need to be. We should have been having this conversation a year and a half ago, and they've just ignored us.
You have said earlier that I listen to the last person in our race team, and I always say we got to go do whatever the last person tells me about a particular subject. You are Pollyannish to think that government would work so efficiently.
Can you define Pollyannish to me first?
Pollyannish means you have a view of the world that is kind of simplistic and everything works out in the end.
Okay. I appreciate that. That's a compliment.
It kind of.
I didn't know what that word meant.
Well, there you go. There's your definition.
Did you know?
Shay
didn't know.
You know, we gave them those opportunities last year. Hey, let's all sit down around the table and let's get this worked out. Nope. We're the powerful. We're the bully.
We're going to win.
Yep. We're the 800-pound gorilla. You're just a little one. We've got the control because we've got our hands in the pockets of the people that make decisions, or at least we know. They must have known they had a default in the back, which was the budget. They must have.
Yeah.
Because every time we'd say, hey, let's work this out. We were even, the concessions that we were talking about were very significant and very beneficial to the other side. And they wanted nothing to do with it. And see, this is the one thing I'll say. The differences that I see between skill and perhaps casinos and charitable. There's a lot of greed on the other side. Gordon Gekko said in that Wall Street movie, greed, for lack of a better term, is good. In their mind, that's what they think. They want it all. But if you're going to create an industry, a marketplace, which we've done by voting, that ship has sailed. I've said it before, I'll say it again. It should be more like a farmer's market. Nobody goes to a farmer's market when there's one farmer. You know, we always have these farmers markets in our local towns and in our areas, and usually there's a panoply, a large assortment of different farmers who bring their fresh produce and goods and pies and donuts to the marketplace, and people walk around and they mingle and they socialize. That's what a marketplace is. But it seems like the gaming marketplace, they want to have a farmer's market where it's one, the same corner, one size fits all. You only get one choice. You only have to buy here. You can only buy it here. That's not how America works. That's not how the free market works. So hopefully we're fighting the fight. We're putting on our suit and armor, and we're going to go get them. And I feel pretty good about what we're doing in the start of this. We've got about 6 weeks. We'll keep you guys informed as we go through it all, and let you know how we come out the other side. So, you know what? And everybody needs to fight like this, because Hermie, you stood out. You had the courage to step forward and say, "This isn't right," and I'm willing to put my name, reputation, and my character on the line. And you've done a wonderful job. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's me and you against the government,
Check.
The casinos.
Check.
Charitable gaming.
Check.
The General Assembly.
Check. Check. Yeah.
I mean, it's
Sisters of the Poor.
I mean, really and truly. I mean, it's and their team is getting bigger.
Yeah.
They're by the day.
Yeah.
Their team is getting.
Oh, it's little guys. You know, the ones that just used to be a fleck on your shirt that you just kind of brush off. Now all of a sudden they're bringing the heavy hitters.
I guess it's, you use that term again,
Pollyannish.
I just don't see it the way they see it, because my opinion, quite frankly, is all the time they're spending worried about us, they should spend worrying about their business. And if they do things right, the right way, they're going to get their share of business, and they're going to take some of our business anyway because of things that casinos have. That's not even the same customer. People that go to play the casinos and go to Rosie's are not the same people that hang out at the convenience store or the truck stop and play the games.
That's right.
If they need to focus their time on their business.
Yeah.
I don't spend any time at Sadler Brothers Oil Company worrying about what my competitors are doing. Because I know if I look after my customers the way I'm supposed to with price and service and support, I'm going to be fine. If I don't, somebody's going to come take them. Right. And it just befuddles me why all these millionaires and billionaires and all these high rolling people that have been successful in life, some of which are my friends, are so worried about us and spending all this time and money to battle us instead of taking care of instead of worrying about their own business. But
all right. Yeah.
We got to lean right.
Let's lean right.
All right. You got a sponsor this week?
Same sponsor I had before, but I'm actually looking for new sponsors. You know, I want to read some new script, but I'm very grateful for Tom Graziano and his support. Brought to you, the Leaning Right Moment, brought to you by Charlie's Waterfront Cafe in beautiful downtown Farmville, Virginia. He's got a bakery. He's got a tasting cellar for Virginia wines. He sits on the beautiful, it's either a creek or a river, I don't know, but I think it's called the Appomattox River. You want good food, and you're dropping your kid off at Longwood University or Hampton-Sydney College. You're going in there to buy some furniture at Greenfront. Go to Charlie's Waterfront Cafe, because quite frankly, it's the only good place to eat in Farmville, unless you like Hardee's. So definitely go see Tom Graziano. Tell him that you listen to this podcast. Tell him that you're a friend of Bill Stanley's, just like he's a friend of Bill Stanley's, and see if he knocks anything off your bill. No promises, but thank you, Charlie's Waterfront Cafe. All right. We've got just a couple quick Leaning Right moments. I'm saving one that's going on in Virginia till next week.
Okay.
It's kind of important, but I want to make sure that we're up on and knowing exactly what's going on right here. But the first one is, of course, you and I have talked about, in fact, we talked on last week's podcast, that the inflation rate for the month of, let's say, July was 8.2%. Just 2 years ago, inflation rate was at a little over 2%. We've seen a raise in energy prices, cost of goods, food, everything across the board is going up. They're saying actually right now that the average family of four has $425 less to spend on whatever their monthly expenses are, because it's being eaten up by inflation for their regular, normal, hard costs. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a lot of money.
Well, some people don't realize if the number for July was 8.3%.
August
8.3 went up from 2 to 3. Okay.
Yeah,
Some people realize the lower income people that thank the Lord are getting up every day, going and working for a living to provide for their family. Most sectors of the economy, things that people have to spend their money on, the inflation is way higher than 8.3%.
Oh, yeah.
The costs are up way more than 8.3%. So we're having to look at our businesses and our employees and our payroll. You give somebody basically a 10% raise, it's barely even keeping up with cost of living.
Right. They're not getting out in front, or if they are, it's not by much.
Not getting ahead.
Before I came here, of course, because I stay in this apartment, I went to the store to get some food for the week. Meat prices have gone up because I always look at them. It's an extra $2 more for a pound of chicken than it was. The last time I think I went, which was 2 or 3 weeks ago. Yeah. My wife does the shopping usually, and we kind of split the responsibilities at home. But then I was looking. I said, okay, well, let me go over and look at red meat. Red meat's it's crazy.
Yeah.
Except maybe at Artie's Butcher Shop down there south of Emporia.
He likes the butcher.
If you guys listen to Maverick 102.3 Wednesdays, you have Hermie Sadler there.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. I listen to it every time. And I got to go visit that butcher shop because it's actually a good price.
Elias Butcher Shop.
And but meat prices. And we feel it. We see it. We know the difference. We feel the weight in our wallets. It's lighter. But the guys on the left, and especially Biden administration, any kind of Democrat who's running for office now, thinks that everything's okay. And that it wasn't their cost or their problem. Because you know what? They're not really feeling it. Because, they drive around in $100,000 Teslas. They're the ones that say, oh, gas prices, I'd go buy an electric car, to us in the middle class who can't afford an electric car. And then California says, oh, go green energy, but then please don't charge your electric car. Everything is so hypocritical. They just don't understand what's going on. Or they just try to say, nothing to see here. Mm-hmm. Move along.
Deflect.
What you think is right is wrong.
What
is up is down. And they just keep repeating it until, my wife used to say to my kids, if you repeat it often enough, you start believing it. Doesn't make it right. Doesn't make it true. But they are. And they just keep repeating it and repeating it. So last night, I'm sitting there watching 60 Minutes. I don't know. It's like sometimes I listen to NPR. I don't know why, but I want to hear the other perspective. I was listening to President Joe Biden talking about inflation. Now, 60 Minutes is not some right-wing political TV show. It's been on forever. It used to be balanced. It's a lot less balanced now. But here was Joe Biden. Our inflation rate is at 8.2% the month before. It went up to 8.3%, which means it's rising. In fact, in the household goods, it went up 4%. We're seeing a big jump in household goods and services that are needed for monthly running of a household, for a family or for individuals, going up. But he has a different take. 8.3% inflation we're talking about Jimmy Carter inflation, but not according to President Biden. Here's President Biden on the response when he's asked, is this a serious issue and a problem? Inflation just went up from 8.2 to 8.3. That sounds pretty bad, doesn't it, President Biden?
And as you know, last Tuesday, the annual inflation rate came in at 8.3%. The stock market nosedived. People are shocked by their grocery bills. What can you do better and faster?
Well, first of all, let's put this in perspective. Inflation rate month to month was just an inch, hardly at all.
You're not arguing that 8.3 is good news.
No,
in my house, an inch is.
But it was 8.2 or 8.2 before. I mean, it's not. Maybe I can make it sound like all of a sudden, my God, it went to 8.2%. It's
the highest inflation rate, Mr. President, in 40 years.
I got that, but guess what we are? We're in a position where, for the last several months, it hasn't spiked. It has just barely, it's been basically even. And in the meantime, we created all these jobs, and prices have gone up, but they've come down for energy. The fact is that we've created 10 million new jobs. Since we came to office. We're in a situation where the unemployment rate is about 3.7%, one of the lowest in history. We're in a situation where manufacturing is coming back to the United States in a big way.
Where? I mean, can you believe this?
It's really unbelievable.
I mean, it's delusional.
I told you this before we started taping. He's saying it only went from 8.2 to 8.3. And I said, let's go back to a racing term. Okay, at Daytona and Talladega, we run restrictor plates. You put a restrictor plate on, your horsepower was 400. You take the restrictor plate off, horsepower goes to 800. And it's almost like we took the restrictor plate off and we had 800 horsepower. And once you get to 800 and it's skyrocketed to 800, it's hard to get horsepower up to 805. Any gain you make is significant.
Right.
But he's trying to somehow defend that it only went up 1 more percent. I'm like,
by an inch. Just a little bit.
It's just, and then he talks about energy prices. Then he's not going to say that he has basically depleted our emergency reserve of crude
which was bought by Trump mostly
$20 a barrel.
$20 a barrel.
And now he's going to have to pay over $80 a barrel to replenish it. I mean, nothing they're doing is making any economic sense or rationale whatsoever.
And he was selling some of that to China.
Yeah.
Selling our strategic reserve to China.
And
then we got to buy it back from Saudi Arabia and those countries that hate us and want to see us fail.
There's no way they could be doing all this stuff. It has to be on purpose.
I mean,
I just don't understand.
Could they be that ignorant?
I don't know.
Could they be? I mean, I'd like to think intelligent people at least are elected to higher office. I don't know what surround themselves with intelligent.
I don't know what Biden's approval rating is right now, in the 30s, I guess. But how can 30% of the people in the United States listen to that and think, "Oh, we're in good shape"? I mean, I just don't get it. I don't understand.
Well, I think part of it though too is they have been used to dominating the media, and the media is the message is the voice, and the voice is what they hear. And so what they're hoping is that if they say it enough times, just like I said when my wife says to my kids, they'll start believing it, and that the masses will just start believing it. I mean, that's what they have to think because they dominate the traditional legacy media. So how dare you? What? I mean, 60 Minutes, I didn't know I was going to have this unfair question. It's only gone up an inch. So, I mean, really what Biden is saying is inflation is only at 1/10 of a point.
Yeah.
Not at 8.3. It's 1/10, so it's nothing. There's no differences.
It's not like it resets at the end of each month.
Correct. It's going up.
It's a lingering effect.
Right.
And
not only that, you've got the Fed. Now you got, which is basically an unconstitutional national bank, in my opinion. They're trying to cool off the economy and the inflation rate by raising interest rates, which are now putting home ownership out of reach, car ownership out of reach. You know, they're trying to lessen the buying power of the average United States citizen so as to cool off the economy for the problems created by their policies.
Yeah.
And then they say, hey, and then, oh, wait, we created 10 million jobs. You got rid of 10 million jobs during the pandemic. You told people not to work. Now people aren't coming back to work. You can create a job. Whether you can fill it's another thing. You know that better than anybody else.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
I mean, I heard that and I had to record it and play it over. I rewound it and said, he can't be saying that. And almost, because I think we have ESPN between the two of us, you send me a tweet with that very thing on it, and I
copied the video and pasted it and sent it to you, and I'm like,
oh my God.
Just listen to this, you know. But they are, the sad part about it is, or one of the sad thing is, they are manipulating some of the people that are in the most precarious situations.
Right.
The ones that really don't know any better. They don't understand it the correct way, and they're taking advantage of people like that and telling them how good things are. Look, if it wasn't for me, things would really be bad, but because of everything I'm doing, it's only 8.3. It's only up a skosh from last month.
A skosh.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So it's really
unbelievable.
Not only sad, but dangerous.
Yeah. And, you know, then he's the same guy that sits there and says, I'm great for democracy, but those MAGA Republicans, go out and beat them up. I mean, they're actually saying, you know, some of the Democrats, call to arms, you know, go after them. They're bad. They're traitorous. They're a threat to democracy. What's a threat to democracy is you start pulling away the pillars that hold us up, the foundational pillars like family, like virtue and morals and ethics, like Judeo-Christian values, like a free market society as the directional pace for how someone will live their life or choose to live the American dream. Pull all those away, and what do you get? You get controlled chaos, controlled by the government. And that's what we're heading towards. And then don't call a conservative who believes in life and free markets and limited government and states having more power than the federal government. Don't call us lunatics and bad for the country and domestic terrorists and hateful and should be nullified. This seems to be just almost a government-controlled takeover of our lives.
His messaging is far different from his inauguration speech when he said he was going to be the president for everybody.
I'm a uniter, not a divider.
Yeah,
that's horseshit.
Talking down to everybody. What's next?
All right, so it goes further. You know, we've seen actually over 2 million illegal immigrants, is it a year, are pouring over our border ever since the wall stopped being built. This new Democrat leftist policy of just saying we are an open border threatens our democracy, threatens our economic stability. People pouring over the border right now, and quite frankly, when they pour over the border, that puts a lot of stress on our social services in the states that they arrive in. And certainly it is dangerous for our security because we're seeing a lot of criminal behavior. We're seeing a lot of crimes being committed. We're seeing a lot of human trafficking of children. Fentanyl and drugs coming over the border are pouring in and hurting our citizens who take these drugs and overdose and die. And these drugs are being produced by China, carried on the back of these illegal immigrants who are brought over by coyotes, the coyotes and the cartels, who then bring people over in some of the most dangerous circumstances, put them in peril, threaten them with death or their family with death unless they do what they say. We have terrorists, people on the domestic terrorist watch list who are coming over the border. But then we have these sanctuary cities, Hermie. You know, that I'm a sanctuary city. You bad people that are for law and order and legal immigration but don't like illegal immigration, you're abusing those people that are coming over. And so we're a sanctuary city. And so I think, quite frankly, what we've seen here is in the past week, Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, and the governor of Texas, who they're suffering some of the greatest stress because these people are coming into their states, and they're not sanctuary states, they're border states. Our border states, some towns are taking 11,000 immigrants a month that they can't handle. They don't have the structure for it, and they're not a sanctuary state, and our federal government's not doing it. So what does Ron DeSantis do? What does the governor of Texas, Governor Abbott, do? Well, they're transporting by bus, air-conditioned bus, lots of food, water, taking care of them, and they're all volunteer. It's taking them to these sanctuary cities like New York City, like Washington, D.C., and most recently to Martha's Vineyard. Martha's Vineyard. And did you see the eruption of these liberals who have signs out in their front yard about how liberal they are and they're a sanctuary city and they're for, you know, open borders and free immigration? Because I think, quite frankly, Hermie, I think what it is, what I started, and then my wife kind of brought this up to me and it clicked, and maybe I'm the last one to come to the party, but they are wanting these immigrants who are pouring over the border to come into states that are like Texas, like a red state. And politically, what it must be is they're expecting then, when they become voters or vote illegally, that they're going to change that red state into a blue state.
Because Biden told it, let us in.
Right. And even Biden, remember months ago, year ago, ongoing, at night, he was flying in these immigrants into Florida, into red states from Texas. He was doing that. He started that. So the governors of Florida and Texas decide, well, we're going to take these immigrants voluntarily, whoever wants to volunteer, and we're going to ship them to sanctuary cities, sanctuary states.
Get a dose of this.
New York, Washington, D.C. And now the richest place on earth.
What an inconvenience these people have to be in Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah, Martha's Vineyard of all places. And you know what? Their hair caught on fire. Their hair caught on fire. And within 48 hours, Hermie, of them landing there, and all the immigrants were like, this is one of the greatest places in the world. And you would think they would have been welcomed with open arms. It wasn't like 11,000 a month.
Where's my house? Where's my cell phone?
Where's my job?
Where's my job?
50-50. And you would have thought that Martha's Vineyard was going to tip into the ocean and fall and be overwhelmed by the 50. They freaked out.
All of a sudden, immigration became a thing in Martha's Vineyard.
Yes, they freaked out. And within 48 hours, guess what happened? Guess what happened? They got picked up by these liberals, put on an airplane or a boat, and taken to Cape Cod and put in military barracks because they weren't good enough to be in their sanctuary city. Mm-hmm. You know, it's the not in my backyard defense. You know, I'm all for it, but I love these reckless policies until they come into my purview, my $1 million neighborhood.
And the answer to this may be yes. I don't know. But has Joe Biden, President Biden, and or Vice President Kamala Harris, has either one of them been to the southern border?
Kamala Harris is the czar of immigration, and she has not been to the southern border.
I mean,
remember, she's
really,
never been to
truly,
Europe
she's not.
either.
She's not.
No, she went to some South American country and basically said, "Come on in." But she's never been to the southern
I saw
border.
one of these people being interviewed by one of the news stations the other day when they just got off the bus. They were right outside of where Kamala Harris's house is, outside the gate, and this guy was interviewing one of them, and he said, "Did you think it's okay to come?" And the guy says, "Yeah." Joe Biden said, "Come on,"
Yeah.
That's the mindset that they.
And some of these buses stopped it out front of the Naval Observatory, which is the vice president's house in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And their hair was on fire again. How dare you abandon these people? They even compared it to trafficking.
We don't have the resources for this.
Yeah, that somehow DeSantis and Abbott are trafficking. What about the trafficking coming across the border that they say is so great? All these kids probably being raped and put into sexual, horrible sexual positions.
Same problem
by
we've
adults.
got right here in Virginia in the General Assembly. If these problems don't affect that person individually or something they have to see or deal with on a daily basis, it's not a problem for them.
And in Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket, the richest, most liberal islands in the north, you cannot be Hispanic and be on my island unless you're carrying a weed whacker. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I mean, they're good to work on my yard, but not to live on my island. Yeah. And so they busted, they got them right out of there. Within 48 hours, in fact, when it came in, they declared a national emergency, basically a crisis. And I want you to listen to this.
In a nutshell, it's let them all in as long as you don't bring them here.
Correct. They should go to red states so that they change the red state agenda to a blue agenda, and then we can take it over. So this is a representative of Martha's Vineyard when asked, all right, so you're a sanctuary island. You're taking care of these people, right? You can handle all this stuff. These 50 people, not the millions that are pouring into Texas and Arizona and New Mexico. You can take care of this, right? And this was her response.
So,
what are the most difficult challenges right now?
The difficult challenges are at some point in time, they have to move from here to somewhere else, right? We don't have the services to take care of 50 immigrants.
Don't have the services for 50?
We certainly don't have housing. We're in a housing crisis as we are on this island.
Because they're $1 million houses.
A housing crisis?
We can't house everyone here that lives here and works here. We don't have housing for 50 more people.
We don't have housing for people that work here.
She opened with, we're going to have to get rid of these people, in the next couple hours. It's messing up our neighborhoods. I mean, housing crisis, because the lowest house price on Martha's Vineyard is like $2 million. I mean, where's the charity of these liberals? Why don't they welcome them in? Hey, come on in. Let's get you educated. We'll get you a lawyer. We'll get you services. Oh no, not my backyard. This is Texas's problem. And they can go up there to those little, Chablis sipping white silk stocking parties that they throw and talk about how bad Donald Trump is and these Republicans, they're so mean to the immigrants. And then they don't get an influx of like thousands. They get 50 and they go nuts. So guess what they did? They got rid of them. So you would think that, maybe the left would say, hey, we understand it now. We get it. No, they turn and say, this is actually Ron DeSantis and Governor Abbott. They're playing politics with these people, dropping them on the streets of D.C., dropping them in poor Martha's Vineyard. I mean, good God, how could you abuse somebody worse by giving them a nice air-conditioned plane ride with food to Martha's Vineyard? That is abuse. What we're going to see is we're going to hear from the White House, Jean-Pierre, whatever her name is basically almost you can't understand what she's saying because it never makes sense. So we're gonna listen to her right now because she thinks what DeSantis and what Governor Abbott did are horrible, and these immigrants deserve better.
The children Governor Abbott abandoned in Martha's Vineyard, the children that Governor DeSantis abandoned as well, deserve better. They deserve better than being left on the streets of D.C.
I want to be abandoned in Martha's Vineyard. Can anybody abandon me in Martha's Vineyard for at least a month?
Stranded in the river?
Yeah, or dying in the Rio Grande. Or in the back of a trailer, a tractor trailer, in 150-degree heat, dying laying on top of each other. or smuggled by coyotes across the Rio Grande and then sold into sex trafficking. Yeah, they deserve better than Martha's Vineyard. I mean, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
Where's that, by the way? Is there a better place than Martha's Vineyard?
The whole narrative, that is how they've gotten by, is changing the narrative to fit what they want people to think.
Yeah.
Which is not reality.
She gets even better. She keeps going. This is the White House spokesman for the President of the United States. They deserve better than to be dumped in Martha's Vineyard. These children, poor children, because then the liberals will take them immediately and put them on buses and send them to Cape Cod. But you know what? This is a cruel political joke.
That Fox News and not the Department of Homeland Security, the city, or local NGOs were alerted about a plan to leave migrants, including children, on the side of a busy D.C. street makes clear that this is just a cruel, premeditated political stunt.
Cruel political stunt. You didn't call Homeland Security that we were going to have a bunch of illegal immigrants coming into the vice president's area where she lives at the Naval Observatory? Oh, I mean, you guys didn't even call ahead, so we could have put them back into a red state.
It's just laughable.
I know, but she didn't stop there. She did not stop there. She accuses now Ron DeSantis and Governor Abbott of being like coyotes. Listen.
These vulnerable migrants were reportedly misled about where they were headed. Told they would be headed to Boston, misled about what they would be provided when they arrived, promised shelter, refuge benefits, and more. These are the kinds of tactics we see from smugglers in places like Mexico and Guatemala.
Oh, yeah. They told them that they were going to a really nice island with white people that would help them, who are really, they're liberal and they love illegal immigration. They love illegal immigrants. And they were lied to because those liberals wouldn't let them stay on their little Tony Island. This is the President of the United States, the spokesperson, the mouthpiece for the President of the United States, and then says what DeSantis did and what Abbott did is akin to smuggling because they took them to sanctuary cities where self-declared sanctuary areas because those two states aren't. And quite frankly, they put them on, how dare you put them on air conditioning and give them, nice food and take care of them, put them on a first-class plane and drop them into Martha's Vineyard. I mean, they're akin to smugglers. Who's encouraging the smuggling? Who's encouraging the smuggling by the open borders? That's the Biden administration.
Well, the guy, as I told you, was being interviewed live on TV. No scripting, just why do you think it's okay to? Because Biden said, it's open. They tell us border is open. Come on.
And they can't find anybody. I saw the CNN thing where they were like walking around. Were you abused coming over on that bus? And no, it was really nice. It was air conditioned. Oh, we had food. No, it's great. No, we know we're illegal. No, it's great. Aren't you being abused by coming over? No, this is nice. This island's really nice. I like it. And, this is a beautiful place.
Yeah.
No. Aren't you being abused by DeSantis and Abbott? No, not really. Doesn't fit the narrative. And quite frankly, it's pulling the curtain back. We've said this before. Suddenly, our policies are for thee, but not for me.
That's right.
And so Governor DeSantis,
they won't go to the border, so these governors are taking the border to them.
Right.
You have to get other people, especially people in decision-making roles, have to get them to understand the emergency, understand the crisis.
Right.
They don't understand the crisis, and they're not there. So they're taking just a smidgen, just a fraction of the tragedy to the decision makers.
Well, so exactly right. And so Governor DeSantis, I think, wrapped it up perfectly, what we've been talking about right now. He was asked the question, the hair's on fire of the liberals. The Democrats don't like what you did. They're calling it trafficking. They're calling it smuggling. How dare you do that? How dare you drop them off in front of our mansions and make us deal with your problem that we've created for you? And you know what Governor DeSantis said? This.
The minute even a small fraction of what those border towns deal with every day is brought to their front door, they all of a sudden go berserk and they're so upset that this is happening. And it just shows you, their virtue signaling is a fraud. So our message is, we're not a sanctuary state. We don't have benefits or any of that. There are some sanctuary jurisdictions, and that would be better. Now, what would be the best is for Biden to do his damn job and secure the border.
I don't think I could say it any better.
I agree. I applaud him for it.
On the floor of the Senate, when Democrats kind of do this, virtue signaling and say one thing but do another, I always say hypocrisy has a name. Well, hypocrisy in this case has a name. It's you liberals that want these open border policies, but not in your backyard. I don't want a Hispanic on my precious island in my multi-million-dollar dwelling. Will not give them food or refuge or shelter unless they're holding a weed eater or mowing it. That's what they do. You know what? And every single time that I've seen a lot of the interview of the migrants, they're saying that the people in the red states are very, very kind to them with open arms, very humanitarian, very, very much sharing, wanting, never leaving them abandoned on the side of the road. You don't see red state towns that are taking 11,000 of these migrants a month screaming, we're having a national crisis. This is a state of emergency is declared, but 50 go on the island of Nantucket and they declare a state of emergency.
Let's just tell it like it is. The liberals want them here, so eventually they'll vote for them, but they just don't want them interfering with their lives. That's what it is.
Just like Ron DeSantis. You've summed it up perfectly. And that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes my Leaning Right moment, sponsored by Charlie's Waterfront Cafe.
We got a few turning left moments. The main turning left for this show is going to be our interview coming up with the legendary Kyle Petty. Yeah. But we do have a couple turning left things that I want to talk about. Bristol was a big weekend. Dominion Raceway, we want a full report of the activities there. But before we do that, I want to mention that our turning left portion of the show is sponsored by Laura Stanley and Vista Installations. She's been running a successful window and door installation company. And, Senator, put your phone down and listen to me.
Oh, I am.
Babysitting politicians and trial attorneys for over 12 years.
Singular, not plural. Politician and trial attorney.
The copy says politicians.
I'm going to have to talk with her about that. It sounds plural.
I think maybe she was trying not to throw it all at you.
Yeah, well,
I
think we see right through that.
The ad doesn't say I've been babysitting a politician. It says politicians.
Okay. I'll have that discussion. We'll see. We might modify your little script there. But I know at least one politician and one attorney, and they seem to be the same person.
Bristol, Chris Buescher got to win. Awesome season in the Cup Series this year with so many first-time or different winners in a season. It's just been great as far as the competition side of it. So Chris Buescher actually won the race at Bristol. The 4 drivers that were eliminated from playoff contention, 4 pretty big names. Tyler Reddick has had a great year with RCR. Of course, he announced he's leaving, and now Kyle Busch is going to RCR, but Tyler Reddick got eliminated from playoff contention.
See, I didn't even watch the race because I was too busy managing the team. So you're telling me this stuff for the first time. I haven't even looked it up on the internet. So
Tyler Reddick,
wow,
out.
Wow.
Austin Dillon, out. Kyle Busch,
so
blown
wait,
engine.
That's RCR. So RCR's out.
Out. And Kevin Harvick, out.
Kyle Busch is out.
Kyle Busch is out.
Wow.
Another mechanical problem with Kyle Busch.
He has to be happy about that.
I gave my thoughts on, I thought Kyle Busch should drive the 3.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I think should happen, if I were Richard Childress, I'd find a way, since we're out of the playoffs, Kyle Busch is out at Joe Gibbs Racing, I'd find a way to try to get Kyle Busch on over to Richard Childress Racing now to finish out the season, to get him. It'll never happen because of sponsor commitment. Right. I don't want people blowing me up on social media. Sally, you know, hey, Tom. I know they have contracts and sponsor obligations, and everybody will give the company line and say, we're going to finish out the season and try to win a race and get ready for next year. That's what everybody says when their season's over.
But they could swap out like Riddick for Bush.
They can't because of contract, unless everybody agrees to release people from.
So M&M's would go over to RCR.
You know a little something about contracts, don't you?
A little bit.
Yeah,
a little bit. Know how to.
I'm saying
know how
would
to break them.
I would say it would take a whole lot of cooperation to do it. But I'm thinking from the outside looking in, if you didn't know how the inner workings of the sport, you would say, wow, if Kyle Busch is going to take Tyler Reddick's car next year, go ahead and get a head start on it.
Yeah.
And it'll never happen. But
it sure would have people talking all the way through the end of the season, especially about stuff that's outside of the championship run.
From now until the end of the season, Kyle Busch has got a lot of fans. Mm-hmm. So there'll be people. But as far as Tyler Reddick and Austin Dillon that are out of the playoffs, nobody will care about them for the rest of the year.
Right.
But if you take Kyle Busch and put him in the 8, and do all that, and maybe, if Reddick were to go to the 18, that wouldn't be 2311, but that would be a teammate. That'd be in the Toyota family.
Yeah, they've got a relationship there between 2311 and Jim Gibbs.
It makes sense, but it's too many moving parts and pieces probably for that to happen. But it is something fun to think about. Another thing I'll say on that subject, I saw an interview that Kevin Harvick did over the weekend,
mm-hmm.
and he seemed to show some frustration at the lack of effort that Stewart-Haas Racing put into trying to get Kyle Busch, which is kind of interesting because, he and Kyle Busch have kind of butted heads over the years.
Yeah.
But he basically came out and said that he was disappointed that Stewart-Haas Racing didn't make more of a push to get a driver like Kyle Busch over at Stewart-Haas.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I was totally not paying attention to NASCAR at all this weekend, but
so now
he's never afraid to tell
on his
opinion. Is he?
Turning left, I want a full and appropriate update of the racing action on the track and in the pits at Dominion Raceway.
Well, okay, so we left early Friday morning to do some meet and greets for our primary sponsor, Pacematic. So my wife and I drove up to Spotsylvania County. We did a lunch kind of thing where we handed out raffle tickets and then raffled off free tickets to the race. I was pretty amazed. I mean, there were people in there at lunchtime playing the skill games in this establishment. And then we, of course, went north to Stafford County to a place called Buffalo Moe's. And so by that time, it was, of course, was the happy hour kind of dinner rush. And there were a lot of people coming in. And we had a really big crowd there, a really energetic crowd. And the Pacematic people were really energizing the crowd. And, of course, they had Pacematic games in that establishment. And we were outside in the bar. We brought the ride-along car, the Pacematic 22. Jonathan Brown was there, one of Jonathan Brown's crew members. Gabriel was there as well. We had a really good time. We interacted with the fans. We made some fans for the race, and then we gave out about 20 sets of tickets, maybe 30. And everybody was coming, and I saw a lot of them there in the stands. So it was really kind of cool to give away free tickets to the Saturday race at Dominion, and had some really good interaction with the fans and took a lot of pictures with them. And they sat in the cars. We had kids sitting in the cars, and it was a real thrill for those kids, and their parents were taking pictures. And so I thought it was a really good meet and greet that we had there. Both events were well attended and went very well. And so I think that's a part of what you do as a race car team is that you do those appearances and work for your sponsor. You know that better than I do. Yep. So that was really my first foray into that area. And I was
build your fan base.
Yeah.
One at a time.
I was pretty impressed, and I thought we had a good reaction. Anyway, so then Saturday, we got up early and went down to the track. We stayed at a hotel that overlooked the track. We could have stayed in the hotel room and watched the race. But I had a fundraiser for my campaign, Stanley for Senate, there at the Champion Suite at Dominion Raceway. And if you've never been,
facility.
If you've never been,
did you
there
meet
before,
Steve Britt
gorgeous.
by chance?
Yes,
nice guy.
Briefly. If you've never been there, it's probably the best short track facility we have in the Commonwealth. And it's got a road course, and it's got a drag strip. So Friday night, after we got back from Buffalo Moe's, we watched drag racing right there. We could see it right from the hotel. We watched it until about 11 o'clock. Then we saw people driving their very expensive cars around the road course.
Yeah.
And then we went to practice. We were dialing in the car. We started at about 10 or 11, started to dial the car in. Jonathan was telling Phil Stefanelli, our car chief, what he was feeling. rather than telling them what to do, and that seemed to work well with the two of them. So they dialed the car into the last practice. We were P1. We were the fastest in practice.
Mm-hmm.
So come race time, we're outside selling merch, Sadler Stanley merch, which you can buy, of course, and we've got Jonathan Brown merch out there as well. And we're meeting the fans. My wife is working that. She's also helping Bobby Labonte's wife, who sells merchandise as well. They're friends, and they were doing all that kind of stuff. And we had a good time with the crew beforehand. And I'm trying to get the event going upstairs, And I think we're coming together, back together as a team. After the break, we won a race before the break in the Smart Series, and Bowman Gray kind of made a lot of people exhausted, I think, and had been trying to get back together as a team. We've got two components of a team. We have to work together. Had a great turnout. Pace-O-Matic people came flew in to watch the race and support our team.
Who came from Pace-O-Matic?
Have a whole list of people, but when they landed, a whole bunch of people. But when they landed, and Scott Klepper was there as well, a whole bunch of people and Scott Klepper, they got out of the car, and there's Gina Reinhardt, our PAR person from Pace-O-Matic, and she's holding her hand in a napkin, and it is covered in blood. And I said, good Lord, what happened to you? Alan Joseph had shut a door on her hand and almost cut her whole finger off on the airplane, I guess. And so she was in need of medical services. Here comes Alan Joseph again. What? House hit by a hurricane or a tornado, runs over himself with a car taking out the garbage, and now tries to cut off the finger of the
How did I
PR
not
person.
hear about this prior to now?
I was trying to save it.
Alan Joseph tried to amputate the hand
Her middle finger, I think. Yeah.
of Gina
Yes.
as they got on the plane.
Well, I think they were on the plane, and Alan was trying to work up, try to find some Bloody Mary mixes.
I'll give you he had to be fixing a drink.
And instead made a Bloody Mess instead of a Bloody Mary. Mm-hmm. And she came in, and she was bleeding like a stuck pig. I mean, she was hurting. And here's Alan. He goes, Alan, how does you remember? I'm like, what? I had to learn again how to read Alan's lips.
Been a while.
I know. I love the guy to death. We love the guy, but
he's an accident waiting to happen,
dude. He's like there's like a gray cloud over top of him.
Yeah.
And so if you're near Alan Joseph, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you're buckled into your car. Make sure maybe you're wearing bubble wrap. As
people might think you're joking, but he actually did. Listen to this, fans. Ran over himself with his own car, taking his trash to the road. Is that a lie?
That's not a lie.
Okay.
And there's a podcast that we've referred to that will never see the light of day where
it's in lockbox.
Right, where Hermie Sadler cross-examines like a prosecutor would cross-examine a defendant on exactly what happened. It's hilarious, but it's so hilarious no one can ever hear it. Very funny episode, but yeah.
But y'all had a good event at the racetrack.
We had a great event. We had great turnout.
Yep.
The food was great. The hospitality was great. The people that were serving us were unbelievable. I mean, Britt has a top drawer operation there. So if you want to run an event there, they have like an amphitheater for music. They've got a second floor bar and grill that, believe it or not, had Pace-O-Matic skill games in it. So that made it even better. So we get through the race, and all of a sudden we're driving back. The race is short, and we get wound up in a wreck. A guy named Jeremy Gerstner spun out, came down, and as we were coming by, and that's a really fast track, just hit us hard as could be, to the point where an ambulance had to come out and check out Jonathan, wrecked the right side of the equipment, Hermie. I think it's going to be about a $10,000 to $15,000 repair, my friend.
Why are you grinning, laughing?
I'm not grinning. I'm not grinning.
Chad, is he?
Well,
no,
nothing on this podcast costs $10,000 to repair, except maybe my internet. But I take the
so you
cost
know
of
what that means, that you cannot offer Kyle Petty a ride in our car.
That eliminates Kyle Petty.
Somewhere along the line, I am responsible for the fiscal
correct
nature of our race team.
Correct.
So I've got to go, quote unquote, find $15,000 somewhere, according to you.
Well, I brought my checkbook just in case.
Write it.
Okay.
Now.
Well, half. Right.
All or
no.
Because you were there. You were responsible.
That's a penalty. Not on the track, but it was a really fast race. But because we had so many cautions and we were running behind, and they had the weekly series, which is the weekly NASCAR series championship there, they think.
Yeah.
And maybe Peyton Sellers won. We don't know. Peyton Sellers from Danville. It kind of made everything slowed down to the point where they shortened the race by like 22 laps. There's a green-white checker because they have a curfew of 11 o'clock at that racetrack, even though it's sitting on a highway that makes more noise than the racetrack.
Mm-hmm.
And so guess who won?
I saw.
Hirschman.
I wasn't going.
Okay. Well, a guy won that a lot of people, he wins a lot.
Yeah. He's a good racer.
Yeah, he is a really good race car driver. And so some people, kind of, those
we got to. He's got to work harder.
Yeah,
we got to work.
So,
harder.
but in defense, Phil Stefanelli being Papa Bear of this team,
Mr. Excitement.
Yeah, he had a couple things to deal with. I mean, he had the guy that wrecked Jonathan coming over trying to explain, that wasn't his fault and this and that, and Phil told him to get the hell away out of our pits because the guy, it was a single car wreck. I mean, I don't know how you can say that's not your fault, but it was, and it really hit us pretty hard.
I know, $15,000.
Yeah, hit us hard in two places, one on the track and one in the wallet, and then he had some problems with maybe some equipment that some people were running, and was protesting that equipment, and then got into it with our friend, the race director, Chris Williams, to the point where when we were packing up the event, we had a successful event. We're walking out. I get a call from Phil. Phil's like, meet me on the road. And he is walking on the road, exiting. We pick him up. We take him. We listen to him. He tells us and regales us with this story about how he and Chris get into it because he's going to defend his team, which God bless him. I love that kind of passion for Mr. Excitement.
Yep.
And they got into it and touched. I mean, that kind of sounds creepy, doesn't it?
It does.
No, it wasn't a good.
I wouldn't have described it like that.
Yeah, it wasn't like a sensual touch. It was a touch, like two guys, like, "Rrr." And he told me a story, and I was like, oof, well, but my son, Colin, my oldest, comes down from Sheetz. He's there. He went to Sheetz, comes back, and he says, hey, the Sheetz cashier told us that there was a fight in the pits, and security had to break it up between two old men, and those two old men were Chris and our boy Phil Stefanelli. And then this morning I heard from somebody who said, man, they were rolling around on the ground and fists were flying. And
none of that happened.
No. And he jacked him up against the Hoosier, the side of the Hoosier holler. And I mean, so this legend is growing.
It's like a fishing story.
I didn't cause it, but.
Did anybody get punched in the face?
No.
Okay. Well, there wasn't a fight then.
There might have been a chest bump.
It wasn't a fight then.
Yeah, a belly bump.
It was not a fight.
That's not a fight?
Unless somebody gets punched in the mouth, it's not a fight.
Oh, really? That's the qualification for that? Yes. All right. So we finished, we started out, we were fastest in practice, started out
really
fifth.
For people that really want to fight.
Yeah.
They're not going to go up to each other and tell the other guy, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. They just go do it.
Kind of like when you did on that story that you had when you had the guy at the bar at South Boston. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Where you just decided when you hit the door, his hands
I pushed
would be on
the door open, and as soon as his two hands hit the door to push us, this was Steve's American Cafe, I turned around and hit him and then ran like a little baby to the car. But I did hit the guy in the face.
Well, then that was more of a fight than this was. But so we had a little melee. We had, some hurt feelings. I bitched at Flow Racing after the race.
And keep in mind, the guy that I was getting ready to go fight in the parking lot, that I dazed enough to get to my car, looked like Chewbacca.
Yeah, we didn't have any.
He's like 6'8", like he just rolled in from Hell's Angels, and had 4 or 5 buddies with him.
Yeah, well, now the story is growing to where it may sound like that at the end, and I just said let the legend grow.
Yeah,
but that's what we had. But you know what? Look, I give Phil credit standing up for the team.
Sure, I don't have a problem.
Good
with
for
that.
him. And so that's how it ended. We finished 15th, laps down. Race was ended early, and that was that. So,
well, you did a great job looking after the race team. I mean, anytime you can go wreck, fight, and not have the race finish, that is a triple header.
Yeah,
hell of a job.
So that means you're not missing another race for the rest of the season. We have 3 left.
Can't afford to.
Right.
I can't afford to.
Good. That takes a lot of pressure off.
I can't afford to.
So that was the race, but it was a good race. Yeah, that is a great track. Very
it's a beautiful facility.
Yeah.
Steve Britt, he came and met with me. We have a mutual friend in Hunter Morin, a great friend of mine from up in the Fredericksburg area. And I met with Steve at the beginning and saw his plans and his dreams for that facility up there. And he's a nice guy trying to work his butt off to keep his dream alive. He's got a lot of money tied up in that facility.
He's got a lot of energy and he's got a lot of ideas. Yeah. He and I sat down a little bit on the phone and talked about potential legislation that could help short tracks and Virginia racing, to build on what we did in creating the NASCAR Stock Car Heritage Trail, something that you and I worked on together that, besides, that's funny. You work on a lot of political things and they don't call you senator or delegate, whether it's the Beagles, short track racing, Heritage Trail, now that kind of thing right now, and even skill games. So we're thinking about ways that we can help these small business owned short tracks in Virginia kind of join up with North Carolina and make it better. But he's got such energy and a love of racing. It's great to be a friend of his. So that's what happened. It cost you $15,000. An old man almost lost his teeth, and he almost got a bruise on his nose, quite like yours.
Right. The race didn't finish. Gina got her hand cut off.
Gina got her finger almost cut off, and I couldn't understand Alan Joseph.
Were there any positives?
I raised some good money for the campaign.
Okay, good.
That if you run for state senate, I can make a donation to your campaign. Does that cancel out everything back?
I don't want to go back to the leaning right, but I did have the opportunity to speak at the Republican committee meeting down in Suffolk last week.
Yeah,
it was great.
Yeah,
it's good.
Yeah, you and I talked about that.
We had a good.
You were received very warmly from the people that I talked to.
It was by far the biggest committee meeting as far as in attendance. It was about 100 people there.
And I heard you made a donation to our first responders.
They were the Republican, which I thought was an awesome thing to do. The Republican committee in Suffolk, and of course I had no idea because it was my first time I'd been to the meeting.
Right.
But they were putting on a free lunch for the first responders, firefighters, law enforcement. And it's kind of one of those things where they have it there at the Elks Lodge, and first responders come all during the day and pick the lunches up. And they had most of the stuff they needed, but they were sending a sign-up sheet around for people to donate certain items. And as I told them, I'm fairly new to the business community in Suffolk. Angie and I bought the Pilot Flying J truck stop in Suffolk in October of 2020. And so I decided on behalf of Angie and I and the truck stop in Suffolk that we would donate they were looking for 500 to feed 500. So we decided to donate the chips for all the potato chips for
That's amazing.
That's great. And that got a big pop. Anything for a pop from the audience,
Yeah, that's the reason you did it. You did it for the first responders, of course. But
and look, that was a great thing they were doing. They were putting it together, and the lady that was doing that, one of the committee members, was really passionate, and she seemed, like she kind of pleading to the other committee members and the people at the meeting, please, we need some help, and so we wanted to step up and help that. But I enjoyed that. But overall, good weekend. I had a once in a lifetime weekend, with my kids and daughters and things of that nature.
And you know what? While I was trying to manage relationships, fundraisers, politics, bloody fingers, fighting old men. This is
torn up race car.
I have a little surprise for you. This is what was going on while I was doing all that hard work and maybe not winning but losing. This is what was going on, and this is actually my new client. You can't see it, you can't hear her, but I'm going to tell you right now, this is some of the best dance moves I've ever seen. If you could see it, it's amazing. But you can listen to it and you can hear the crowd go wild when the mother of the bride and 3:00 a.m. and a bottle of wine meet.
3 hours after the band had packed up and gone home.
When they meet right here. You have recorded the wrong.
That's me and Haley. That's even better. That's me and Haley dancing.
All right, this joke I was going to play on you.
This is me and Haley dancing.
That's great. That's a great song, actually. We'll listen to this. Did I send you the wrong thing?
I love live. Listen, this is me and Haley.
Mm-hmm. This is when you guys danced? Did she dance?
Haley did dance.
With her dad?
Yep.
That was awesome. That failed miserably. So,
but what you're trying to get to is Angie and Cora and Cameron were on the band stage 2 hours after the band had gone home.
Correct.
And Angie decided to break out into a dance move that push it real good. Push it real good. And in the last 25 years, I've not seen my wife drink anything other than the occasional Bloody Mary. But in this video, you can see her carrying around a whole bottle of white wine. She drank the whole bottle of wine right out the bottle.
All right. Do you have the audio that you can put up right to the microphone? Because then you'll hear. I mean, she starts out dancing like a bride's mother does. Kind of like swaying a little bit, and then all of a sudden, when the music picks
you
up,
want to hear it?
When the music picks up, you'll hear the crowd scream at 3 a.m. because Mrs. Sadler is getting down and pushing it real good. Here it comes. Watch this. Oh. Holy moly. Woo! Like my wife said when she first saw it, Jesus!
That wasn't a bad pop for 2:30 in the morning.
She can push it real good.
You would think people were...
No. She can push it real good.
And the one part that scared me of the
now
night,
I see why you married her.
we were recording all this stuff and doing all that, and I turned around one time. I don't know if I can find it now. I turned around and Cora, I want you to watch this. This is her cheer partner from UNC, Rice, decided to just pick her up and throw up in the air in the middle of the dance floor like at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Wow. And nobody got hurt. That was a great one.
Yeah.
These are incredible. We need to start videoing our podcast so you can see all this stuff.
But Rice is great. But look, it was a great weekend. And
your wife pushed it real good.
She pushed it real good. And but the bad news is, time she got to the house, she was sore.
I bet.
But
she can dance. And so then I'm talking to Hermie the next morning. I said, "So how's everything?" He's like, "Man, the lights didn't go off till 4 a.m." We're like, "Wow, that's pretty amazing." I said, "What are you doing?" He says what he's doing. I said, well, "My wife has some." "What about your wife?" And I thought, because I have bad ears, that you said, "She's right here in front of me, asleep on the floor." And what he really said was, "She's right here in front of me, sweeping the floor."
Sweeping the floor. Yeah.
So I was like, "That's hilarious." He left her sleep on the floor, and my wife's like, "You're such a moron."
I got up Sunday morning. I slept maybe 3 hours. Got up Sunday morning, and Cora, and spread out in all the different houses, the barn and the mom and dad's house and Elliot's house had about 40 people that stayed on the property.
Did you have them like in stalls?
We have bedrooms at the barn.
Oh, okay.
We put them in bedrooms, cots and everything. So I got up early Sunday morning and cooked a big breakfast for like 50 people. They all had one more little gathering.
That's nice.
And told stories about how much their heads hurt and all that before we get it. But a great weekend.
Yeah.
And it was all good. And I know you tried your best managing the team.
I failed.
Sometimes you just fall short.
I failed. Look, there's only one perfect human being ever to walk the earth, and I fall very far.
Well, we all do when
from
it comes to that. But I mean, I'm not sure I've ever failed as much as you did on any particular weekend at the racetrack, but I wasn't expecting perfect, but I wasn't expecting train wreck after train wreck after train wreck. But
this is why Laura always says, this is why I can't leave you alone, and this is why we can't have nice things.
Right.
By whatever I do.
Can't have nothing.
That's right.
But look, what we do have is Kyle Petty.
Kyle Petty.
Coming up.
Kyle Petty.
So, are you ready for this?
Kyle
you ready
Petty?
for this?
Really?
Are you ready for Kyle Petty?
Man, I think I am. I mean, I read his book.
Yeah.
Have you done your homework? Have you read the book?
I have not all the book, but I've read probably half the book.
And he sent that to you. I went out and bought this on Amazon.
He and King Richard Petty signed one and sent it to me.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. But
you want to switch, or does it say Hermie on it?
No, it's personalized to me.
So I can't switch it.
Yeah, but I bet if you ask him, he'll sign yours.
That'd be great. It'd be
Quite
quite an honor.
But appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll take a short break right here on Leaning Right and Turning Left with Sadler and the Senator, powered by Pace-O-Matic. And then we'll be right back with the Kyle Petty.
Kyle Petty.
Hi, folks. This is Hermie Sadler. Thanks for listening to our all-new podcast, Leaning Right and Turning Left with Sadler and the Senator. I hope you are enjoying the show as much as Senator Stanley and I enjoy bringing it to you. Whether you're a family traveling together or a truck driver hauling freight up and down the highway, I hope you will take the time to visit one of our Sadler Travel Plaza locations in Virginia and North Carolina. Sadler Travel Plaza locations are licensed dealer locations for Pilot Travel Centers. And we also carry Shell Motiva petroleum products for our four-wheel friends. We pride ourselves on providing one-stop shopping for service, food, and entertainment. Our food options include Five Guys Burgers and Fries, Quiznos, Dairy Queen, Hermie Sadler's Faux Show Bar and Grill, Victory Lane Restaurant, Hunt Brothers Pizza, Dunkin' Donuts, and much, much more. Our locations include Sadler Travel Plaza in South Hill, located off I-85 at Exit 12. The Sadler Travel Plaza of Emporia, which is conveniently located on Exit 11B off I-95, and Sadler Travel Plaza on Highway 58 in Suffolk. We also have our North Carolina location, Sadler Travel Plaza in Dunn, North Carolina. That's Exit 75 off I-95. We appreciate all of our customers. And Bill and I appreciate you listening to Leaning Right and Turning Left with Sadler and the Senator, powered by Pace-O-Matic.
Hey, this is Bill Stanley, Hermie Sadler's sidekick on this podcast. When I'm not in Richmond at the Capitol or doing this podcast, my real job for the past 27 years is as a trial attorney with the Stanley Law Group. Here at the Stanley Law Group, we represent our clients in every courthouse in the Commonwealth. No problem is too small for us to solve. No case is too big for us to win. Whether it's criminal charges, traffic offenses, civil disputes, litigation matters of any sort, we handle it all. We make sure that we treat every client like family because they are to us. Your problem is our problem. Your success is our success because we hate to lose more than we love to win. And believe me, we win a lot. Don't believe me? Go ask Hermie. I'm his favorite lawyer, and he hates lawyers. So give us a call at 540-721-6028 and let us help you. Or visit our website at www.vastanleylawgroup.com. That's www.vastanleylawgroup.com. At the Stanley Law Group, we'll make sure we're the lawyers that you swear by and not at. And we're back. I'm Virginia State Senator Bill Stanley, still leaning right.
And I'm Hermie Sadler. I'm turning left. And finally, Senator Stanley, we have made the connection and got the guest. We've been talking about him here for a couple weeks. New book out. We'll talk about that.
Yes.
And we finally made the schedules work. And we've been excited about this for a long time. It's a longtime friend and got a chance to race with him and work with him in television and still call him a friend to this day is none other than Kyle Petty. Kyle, thank you so much for taking a few moments with us. I know you're busy. You're writing a book. You're running a nursery service. You got a lot of stuff going on.
Well, and he might be the future driver of our open wheel modified number 30. Oh, I wasn't supposed to ask him, was I? All right.
Not yet.
There we go.
Not yet.
There we go.
Not yet. Well,
Listen, thank you guys. We have been trying to set this up, and it's not my schedule anymore. I got a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 2-month-old. It's their schedule, and that's what it seems like we just couldn't get it done. So thank you guys for hanging with me and holding out a place for me.
Well, look, I've been working through your agent, Rutledge Wood, and he, I've been getting my people in touch with your people, which I was told was his people, but we finally got everybody on the same page. So there you go.
Yeah, that might be the problem, man. That might be the problem. I don't know what door you came in with Rutledge, but it wasn't the front door.
It was not.
Tell you that.
Look, we want to talk. We got a lot of things to cover, a lot of things to talk about, but I want to start now, and then we'll start there and go back. Senator Stanley, mentioned the book, and I know you've been busy for the last couple of months promoting the book, doing signings. I appreciate the one you sent me, Elliot. He got one as well. So why a book and why now?
So here's what happened. I play music. I got guitars.
You played at Faux Show. Playing at Faux Show several years ago is really what put you on the map.
I did play at Faux Show. Yeah, that's at the top of my resume, as a matter of fact.
There you go. There you go.
I played there, but so I play and I've written forever, and I talk about that a little bit in the book. But when the pandemic started, let's go back to February, March, April, right along in there. I get up at 5:30 every morning. I play the guitar. I write. I work out. That's my time. That's my time, and that's where my time of the day is. So When everything happened, then Morgan, my wife, she was pregnant with our second child, Cotton, and no one knew how COVID would affect pregnancy, how it was going to affect women. So we just locked up. And for so long, people have said, man, why don't you write down some of those crazy stories? Why don't you just write down some of that stuff? Just as a record, just write it down. And I got to thinking, because I was so, you're just here. And I got to thinking about it, and I'm thinking, man, you know what? I was born in June of 1960, went to Daytona in July of 1960, and been going to the racetrack ever since. I grew up not only with my dad, but I grew up in the garage area, spending the summers with David Pearson and Kel Yarborough and Richard Petty and Bobby and Donnie and Charlie Glotzbach and Bobby Isaac and Cale, guys like that. Then I got to see Earnhardt come along. Then I got to see, Jeff Gordon and those guys. Then Jimmy Johnson comes along, and I get to race against all those guys. So I've been here a long time. So I decided I would start writing some stuff. I just, instead of doing the music in the mornings, I'd write down stuff. So the very first story I wrote, I will tell you this, I'm waiting to hear back from the Guinness Book of World Records. Because my wife said it was quite possibly the longest run-on sentence with no punctuation, more misspelled words than she had ever seen in her life. But she said, there's something in there. So I kept doing it, and got up with Ellis Henneken, who had written Michael's book. And I knew it. You didn't have to educate him. He already knew about racing. And he kind of led me in the right direction. So I think really the pandemic and just having time. You know how your schedule is.
Yeah.
I know how my schedule is. And I know how it was as we drove and when we raced. There was no time for you. And the time that was yours, you gave to your family. Because that was the important thing, was to give back to your kids and to your family. So this was the first time I had some time in a 24-hour period that I could spend at least a couple hours and do stuff. So it took a couple of years. It took about a year and a half to get it all put down, but it came out. I'm pleased with it. I was proud of it.
How was the reception to it been so far? I see. Of course, you go places and sign autographs. People love you, all that. But how is the for the people that really view books like this for the content, and I mean, what kind of feedback are you getting from the book?
So it's been good. Here, and this is what I'm going to say this to you, and you'll understand this. A lot of people that I've said this to don't understand it. But you got a copy. I sent you guys. I sent most everybody I know. People I'd raced against. People that don't even like me. I sent a book. You know what I mean?
Sent them 2 books.
Just to say, yeah. So just here it is. So the first person, no joke, the first person I heard back from was Mark Martin. And when I hung up the phone, I called my wife. I said, I don't care if this book sells any. I don't care. The conversation I just had with Mark Martin may be one of the most special conversations I've ever had in my life. And then I got a text and an email from Ray Evernham, and then a couple other people. And I think it's your peers. That's who you seek approval from. That's who you tried to beat your whole life, are your peers. And when they say stuff, it means a lot. The reception, for selling, and we were on a Wall Street Journal bestseller list, on 2 or 3 stuff like that, Amazon. That's all cool. Believe me, that is cool, because the fans are what we do a lot of things we do for. But that gratification in your heart that fills your heart is your family and your friends and what they have to say about it. And that to me has been the best thing, the best reception.
Well, let me tell you, I think I'm the only person here that went to Amazon and bought the book and read it cover to cover. And I'm just going to say a couple things. It's a beautiful, wonderful story. It's a great read. And if you've heard Kyle Petty in your, when you watched him on TV, it's in his voice. So it's so easy then to have Kyle Petty there as you're, in your bed reading, telling you a story in his voice, in his words, in his way. And a lot of books don't have that. A lot of books are dry. I always read nonfiction. I don't read fiction stuff. But it made it flow so unbelievably well. And in each paragraph, there's a little story, but in each chapter, there was a lesson. And I mean that sincerely. And there's a passage I want to read at some point that really struck me, to the point where I read it 3 times and then I read it to my wife. And it made such a difference. It encapsulated what it was to be a father, to be a parent. You've got racing stories in here, but what you really have is, the overarching petty family story and your place in it. But really, the tribute to Adam all the way through just matters so much. And so, you know what I'm going to do? I put on my glasses and I'm going to read this. And these two paragraphs has meant more to me in any book I've read in such a long time. And by the way, William Faulkner has the world record for the longest run-on single sentence. I think it was 13 pages, so I'm sure you didn't hit that. And that was actually published. But listen to this, and I think you probably would read it much better than I. But again, I dog-eared the page and read it. I've read it at least 3 or 4 times already, but here it is. In my short time on earth, I witnessed too many fathers living vicariously through their sons, pushing their sons to do things the fathers wish they had done themselves, things the sons didn't really have a passion for. The sons just went along because it was that they didn't want to disappoint their dad. Mothers do that with their daughters too, I suppose. But I'd seen it more with fathers and sons. I vowed I would never do that with any of my children. Maybe that's just me talking, drawing from my own experience as a father and especially as a son. But too many of us spend too much time in our youths either being forced or pressured to act like adults. And then when we get to be adults, it's too late to act like children. Certainly until you're out of school and on your own, and you'll have to pull the trigger on some kind of grown-up life. Just enjoy yourself. Try to learn. Figure out what you're good at and what you love. Discover what you really can't stand. Try things, even if they turn out to be the wrong things. Keep an open mind. You're never going to be 12 or 15 or 18 or 21 again. Before you take on all the responsibilities of adulthood, take the time to figure out what you care about and who you are. I mean, for me, that was the most moving part of this book. It encapsulates, I think, the entire overarching story in this book, Swerve or Die. And it was so moving to me that when I read it over and over, it meant something to me too, as a father and upon reflection as a son and as a child. And so thank you for that. I can tell you there's no other passage that I've ever marked that really spoke to me in that way. So
and what is the, just so for the people listening, what is the context of that passage? What I see it's in the...
It's about, it's under the title of the chapter, Boy Wonder. And quite frankly, he's talking about the decisions of his child, Adam, getting into racing. I mean, talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
You were the son of the king. That's a lot of pressure in and of itself, whether you want to race or not. And here you were now as a father with Adam expressing interest in wanting to be a racer. But of course, then you're in that dilemma. Am I pushing him? Is it for me or is it for him?
Exactly. Yeah, and I think I was very blessed. And I've said this 1,000 times to 1,000 people through all my years. We grew up in rural North Carolina. Hermie, you know where Level Cross, North Carolina is. And all my neighbors were tobacco farmers and dairy farmers, chicken farmers. They were just farmers. And the people that lived in the huge city of Randleman, that was about 1,800 people, most of the people that lived in Randleman, they were mill workers. They worked in the textile industry. So we, living in the country, I tell people, we lived on a farm too. We just happened to raise race cars. But there were multiple third generation, fourth generation farms. You just followed what your dad did. But in a lot of ways, you were allowed to not follow what your dad did. The kids down the street, they didn't have to be farmers. They became farmers because that's what they loved. That's what they saw. They loved working the land. They loved being there. Yeah, it was hard. Man, the crops would fail. Something would come through and kill a chicken house full of chickens, or tobacco prices would go down. But they didn't give up. They didn't stop. And I've said this. I was blessed in the sense that my granddad, Lee, allowed my dad to be who he was. My dad allowed me to be who I was. And I wanted to allow my kids to be who they were, to experience things and to be who they were and figure out who they were. And I will say it, and I've said it in countless interviews. If you could set my granddad here today, and you guys could ask him 5 questions, and then you set my dad in the same thing, and you ask him the same 5, and then I walked in the room, and you asked me the same 5, and then Adam was the last one, and you ask him, you would conclude that those 4 guys don't even know each other. They didn't grow up. They don't know anything about each other, because we were allowed to to push those boundaries and to understand that. And you've seen it. I know you've seen it, Hermie, with parents who push their kids and they want them to be the next Jeff Gordon or Jimmy Johnson or Dale Earnhardt. And that's not necessarily what the kid wants, but he loves his parents so much, that's what he does. So that was the context. If Adam didn't want to, then that's good. You know, Austin didn't want to. I love Austin to death. And Montgomery Lee, racing was the farthest thing from her mind. She went to Tennessee. She wanted to get away from this stuff, you know. And then I have 3 little boys now. So it's just find what you have a passion for.
Different in some ways, but similar, I guess. You know, I have 3 daughters, been blessed with three daughters. My oldest daughter, Cora, who just got married this past weekend, she grew up playing a little bit of ball, but mostly it was about cheer for her. She was good at it. She ended up, later in college cheering at UNC and cheered in 2 national championship basketball games. But I was gone all the time when they were growing up. You know all about that. But I was determined that one of my daughters was going to race. I just, and I was in the go-kart business. I still build and sell go-karts now. So I went to her. Cora at this time was probably 12 years old. Probably, it sounds funny to say this, but a little bit too old, really, in karting terms to get started. But I told my wife, I said, I just really want her to see if she likes it. So finally she agreed. Cora says, okay. So we put a cart together for her, put an engine on it, put the seat together, did all that. And this is, she's 25, so 12, 13 years ago. So we were going to Margarettsville Speedway, a little dirt track, about 30 miles from my house in Emporia. And we went down for the day, set it up, and we had her going. She went right on the racetrack, and it was 4 or 5 other guys there testing. She went right up there on the racetrack, wide open, didn't know any better, wide open, flying, and ran really consistent laps. She held the wheel straight, all the things you want in an accomplished kart racer, and just flew. And so she went back out a couple times. Could not have gone any better. But we got in the car driving back home after that, and we talked a little bit, small talk, but nothing even about karting or the track or anything. So we got home, and my wife says, how'd it go? I said, Angie, she really did great. She says, what are you going to do now? I said, well, as much as I'd like to go talk to her about it more, about when we're going to go again, I really think I need to wait for her to come to me to say, Dad, can we go do it again? And I'm 52 years old, and it's 13 years later, and she never brought it up again. And I just didn't go there. I just didn't, so I ended up on my weekends off for going to cheer competitions in Ohio and Florida and all these things. But I just knew I didn't want her to do things or do that for me. And I thought she didn't come after me about it. And I thought if I put pressure on it, she'd be doing it for me, to your point. So you gotta let your kids go,
Great point. Yeah, that's a great point. Great. There's a story in there I tell too, and I'll mention it real quick. So Adam did the go-kart stuff, and he kept wanting, he wanted better stuff. And I'm like, you can't drive. You don't need better stuff. Learn to drive first. So he finally wins. But anyhow, we bought a late model car when he was 14. And I had a little place, rented a little shop that I did some motorcycle stuff in. So we'd go over there and work on it when he'd get out of school when he was 14. We worked for, I don't know, 2 or 3 months, whatever it is. And then he started coming up with excuses on why he wasn't working. So after about 5 or 6 months, one day he asked me, he said, how's that car coming along? And I said, I don't know. I don't work on your car. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, I don't work on your car. I worked on my dad's car, but I don't work on your car. If you want to get that car ready, I'll go over there and work on it with you. But I'm not going to work on your car and give you a car. And it took about a month, and it flipped, and that kid was so focused. But that was his moment. Mm-hmm. That was that moment that he could have walked away, mm-hmm. and that would have been fine. And that would have been fine with me. And could have walked away and done something else. But that was the moment that he clicked for him. And like I say, with Austin, never wanted to do anything. Just he liked going, he liked being with his brother, but the driving part he didn't like.
I wish I could sit here and talk to you for 2 hours about Adam, but I don't know how you. I've told you many times when together, I mean, as strong as you are, to me, it's just heartbreaking. You know, I don't want to put you through all that, some of that stuff again. But was this book kind of therapeutic for you in some ways to put your feelings actually on paper? Because in all the 25 years, and especially after Adam's wreck, I never ask you about it. I send you a text or give you a call on special days and all that. But as much as I was curious about him, I just didn't want to go there. But to me, when I started reading the book, and it kind of made me feel like that I'm not saying you never talked about it, but maybe this gave you an avenue to kind of get some of it out there.
Yeah, it was very healing. And I didn't know I needed to be healed. That's the part that came from it to me. I thought I had dealt with everything. It was 20 years ago, almost to the day that I started writing this thing, that Adam's accident happened. And I've said it before, I thought time would take care of everything. Time has knocked the sharp edges off of May 12th, the day his accident happened, off of July 10th, his birthday, off of special holidays. It knocked those sharp edges off, but it still hurt. We spoke about Faulkner earlier on some stuff, and he could go to some dark places. Yeah. And to revisit this was a very, very dark place for me, and it took me to a dark place. You just walk down, and I've said it, you walk down that long hallway in your soul, and there's a door, and you open that door, and there's a box marked Adam. And you pull the top off that box, and you're looking at yesterday. It just happened. It's not 20 years ago. Yeah. It just happened. And things I thought I had looked at, things I thought I had dealt with, things I thought I had made peace with, I hadn't. And I didn't know it. I didn't know it. And that was, it shocked me. It hurt me. It crushed me in so many ways. There were days I would come up and write 2 sentences and then lay down on the couch and not write anything for the rest of the day. And it took, thank goodness, Morgan and Overton, who was a little over 2 years old at the time, and Cotton was coming along. You had something and a focus of joy to kind of bring you back out of that. So, but in the end, as you got to a point, then it began to say, okay, I'm good with this. I'm good with it. And writing it was hard. But I'm going to tell you the hardest thing about all of this was when we did the audio book. And you have to go and stand and say it. Writing it and reading it in your head and seeing it is one thing. But when the words come out and they're out there forever and you say it, it's tough, man. It was really tough. It took me probably 2.5, almost 3 weeks. There were days, again, that I would read this stuff, and I could only read it for about 10 or 15 minutes. We'd have the whole studio blocked, for 4 or 5 hours, and I'd read for 10 or 15 minutes, and I'd say, I'll see you guys tomorrow if I feel like it, and I'll come back, and I'd just walk out because I just couldn't go on. I would break down and just start crying. There's probably more tape of me crying than there is reading, honestly, during some of these passages, and I laugh about it now, but at the time, it shattered me for a number of months. So to see it out now and to be able to talk about it, I'm in a lot better place. So it has been my own form of therapy.
Well, now that you're talking about that, and then upon reflection of reading it, you can tell. Because ultimately, the way you don't focus on Adam in one chapter, he's there in every chapter. In some way, even when you're talking about growing up petty, he's there in a certain way. And so it's an amazing tribute. A lot of times we can overdo a tribute to somebody because they mean so much to us. They're connected to our soul. I pay tribute to my father every day because he's still in my head. He may be gone. He died a month after I graduated from college, but I can hear what he says. I repeat his sayings and phrases to my children. He was instrumental in my life, and that's how I pay tribute to him in what I do. I've told Hermie this. I went to my dad one time and I said, Dad, I want to be great at just one thing. I want the Lord to give me one great thing that I can do, and that way, but I've learned you can't change the world. And he said to me, son, if you can do one great thing and you change someone's life, you've changed the world because you've changed their world. Right. That's what I carry with me. But you have carried this on in a way, and Hermie talks about therapy in writing the book. But it's such a wonderful, beautiful, living tribute to your son. And of course, this book and the way it flows, and how then the foundation came about, how Victory Junction came about as a living, breathing homage and tribute to your son as well. I mean, that was an amazing thing that you came to make a difference in so many people's lives by something that your son suggested. Talk a little bit about how Victory Junction got its start. I don't want to ruin, I could talk about every little thing in this book, and I probably will if we have enough time and the computer doesn't kick out on us. But talk to us a little bit about Victory Junction, how it came about, if you haven't read the book, so people know, and how it's a living, breathing example of what your son lived for in his short time here on this good earth.
Yeah, we were fortunate, Adam and I was fortunate. I ride motorcycles, and I love motorcycles. I have a passion for riding motorcycles, and just always have. My dad got me my first. Hermie got go-karts, okay? So I will say this, my dad would not buy us a go-kart, okay? Would not. He kept telling us, go-karts will get you hurt. So he bought us a motorcycle when I was 5. When I was 5 years old, he bought me a motorcycle.
Don't get on 4 wheels, get on 2 wheels.
Get on 2. And here was his reasoning. His reasoning was that when you think you know what you're doing, that motorcycle will put you on the ground and teach you respect for speed and the talent it takes to ride it. And that's, so I just grew up on motorcycles. But Adam and I had been to Daytona for Biketoberfest, and we went over to Boggy Creek, which is a sister camp to Victory Junction. And it's part of Paul Newman's, at the time it was the Hole in the Wall gang group of camps. Now it's called Serious Fun Camps. And when we left there, we were blown away at the kids, blown away just by the activities and what these kids could do and what they were allowed to do. And then the secondary thing was, oh yes, that child has, juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. Oh yes, that child has cancer. Oh yes, that child has Crohn's. These were serious diseases. This child has full-blown AIDS. So these are serious illnesses, but you didn't see that. You didn't see the illness. You saw the child. And as we rode back, Adam, and we talked about it that night, Adam's like, man, we need to build a camp like that. You guys already do that motorcycle ride, man. Let's just take the money and spend it into that. And as always, you just go back to racing, and you think about things like that. And we talked about it again, but then the next thing you know, Adam's not with us anymore. And the first thing that pops in the mind is, let's build a camp. That was something that was in his wheelhouse that he had thought about. And I called Paul because I had been very blessed to drive a few sports car races with him. And Hermie, you'll like this. And he sends his guys down, and he says, I'll send my guys to talk to you about it. I said, okay. So he sends his guys down, and we sat in the back office there at the race shop, and we tell these guys what we're going to do. And, we're going to build this building. It's going to look like a race car, and we're going to build this building. It's going to be the body shop, but it's really going to be a hospital, because that's the kind of thing a camp is. And they said, well, can you give us a few minutes? And we did. And they came back and got us, and they said, we don't think that we want to be associated with this camp. Because we just don't think it'll work. We think it'll fail, and we don't want to put Paul's name or have Paul associated with anything. So we're going to pass. And we're sitting there, and they said, well, what do you guys think you might do now? And we said, build a camp. and they kind of looked at us, and the comeback was, we raised millions of dollars to ride around in a circle. What makes you think we can't raise money to do good for other people? And that's the way we approached it, because we just always felt like that if you were doing good, you could do it. I mean, it was a good cause. You could do it. And, Bobby Labonte and Dale Jarrett, so many people jumped on early on. And Paul called me that night. I will say this. Paul called that night, and he said, what did my guys say? I said, they said you were out. And Paul said, well, they may be out, but I'm in.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
And Paul sent us a check and got it started. So, I mean, it was just cool. Just the way the camp came about. And here's the fascinating part. 2004, we opened the gates. It's 2022. We have touched the lives of over 90,000 kids.
Wow.
And on camp, I think we've seen 35 or 40,000 kids at camp. But we go to hospitals, and we take camp to the hospitals. We call it Camp in a Box. We'll do archery inside the hospital with different things and stuff. But it is amazing. And I go back to what you said a minute ago. You only have to change one life. God doesn't ask you to change the world. He just asks you to touch a life, to touch someone and change them in a different direction. And I tell people all the time, when I leave camp and I see those smiles, I know Adam's still here. So it's incredibly healing for me. But I don't believe that I've ever touched these kids' lives the way they touch my life. They're the ones that are life changers, not me. You know what I mean? Not the race fans, not the race fans are the people who have made this place happen. You know, you drove a truck with Victory Junction on it. You've been a huge supporter. So many people have done that. And it's amazing how these kids pay us back. And they don't even know they're paying us back. They pay us back by coming to camp and playing ball, by coming to camp and catching a fish for the first time, by coming to camp and doing artwork and doing their stuff, and by coming to camp and making friends. So many of these kids, we had a little boy, I'm going to take 1 minute. We had a little boy that came from Ohio, and he was here at camp, and he went to the World 600, the Coca-Cola 600, and I took him to driver introduction, and he had an illness that was very visual, but it was a rare illness. I will say that. It's a rare illness, and I don't want to get into that part of it, but he walked across stage with me at Charlotte at the 600. And a family in Ohio saw this little boy, and their little boy had the exact same illness, and their little boy had never seen another child that looked like him until that little boy walked across the stage. The next year, the little boy came to camp, and the two kids have hooked up, and since that time, they've gone to Disney World 2 or 3 times together. They've vacationed at Myrtle Beach 2 or 3 times together. They've become friends. And there are two kids that met because of camp, because of racing, because of what this sport has done, and because of Adam.
Yeah.
And that's 2 lives that were changed for the good. That no matter what happens in the rest of the world, it touched somebody. And that's always, to me, that's always something
And there are
amazing.
stories like that in the book. When you read it, Hermie, that since I've read it cover to cover, there's a story in there about a young man that didn't want to participate, but then all of a sudden, it changed. There was a change, and it changed his life because of the determination of you and those members and the counselors of the camp that, you know, you're not going to give up on yourself, and we're not giving up on you. And it's a really inspirational story about the camp all the way through. And
You know,
it's great.
The coolest thing about Adam to me is, you know, I was a little bit ahead, never really raced against him a few times, you know, but
Yeah.
he was one, and Dale Jr. was some like this too, in a way. But you think a kid coming along with that last name that had some of the opportunities he had, that he would carry himself in an entitled manner. And Adam was the furthest thing away from that. He spoke to me, other people, fans, strangers. He legitimately, to me, came across as somebody who really appreciated the opportunity that he was given, took nothing for granted, and didn't, you know, of course he knew he was a petty, but he didn't carry himself that way. You know, and to me, that's got to be a tribute to you and your family.
Yeah, listen, that all came from my mom. We were always from Level Cross, and we were always going to be from Level Cross, and that's the way it is. No matter, it didn't make any difference. But and I think that's rural America, man. To me, that's what it is. My dad can still to this day go to Randleman, and he's just Richard. I go back, I'm just Kyle. There is no last name. But I want to say one last thing on the camp with these kids and this stuff. I have determined, Hermie, through all these years, that these kids that go through camp, these kids that go through these medical procedures and the things that they fight and the obstacles in front of them, that they have that racer's mentality where they never stop. They never stop. They never give up. They never look back. There's always a better day coming. They may be mad one day, don't get me wrong, but there's a better day tomorrow. And that's the way racers are. You wreck on Sunday, we'll get them next Sunday. You know, your sponsor goes away, we'll just go find another one. It's not going to be easy, but we'll go find another. They never just stop. And that is the one thing that I think we can all take from these kids. They're so special. They just never, ever give up. There's never an obstacle that they think they can't.
I tell everybody about every day, you know, on a completely different level, you're talking about Adam, and through Adam, all these kids with camp, how they give you perspective. And Bill knows this now, of all the problems that I think I've got. Look, my racing career was not what I wanted it to be. I had fun doing TV, but I was gone a lot. But every time, you wake up thinking I've got, all the things that are problems for me. And my middle daughter is autistic, as you know, Haley Drew. She's like the most angelic thing in the whole wide world. She walks in my room every morning at 6 o'clock, ready to get in the shower and get her clothes on and go do her chores at work. She loves everybody. She doesn't know race. She doesn't know discrimination. She doesn't know hate. She hugs everybody. I mean, I get embarrassed sometimes. I wake up and say, Hermie, what the hell is wrong with you? Why are you worried about these A, B's? Look at this child. She got a whole different perspective. And, sometimes we get those things from areas that we don't truly, I went for, Haley's 25 now, and I for 15 years, I bogged myself down in life saying, why did the good Lord do this to my child? And now for the last 10 years, I'm like, I am so thankful the good Lord put this child in my life because she lifts everybody up. It's just, when you choose to look for the positives like you have, eventually with this stuff, it surely, your own perspective can make a hell of a difference.
Yes, it can. Yes, it can. And listen, that's why no matter what we do, and my grandmother Owens, I talk about my grandmother Owens a lot, some in the book, because she lost her son, Randy. But she always chose to have a caring, giving heart. And in some strange way, it's that child's heart. You got to keep a piece of your heart. It's always got to be that child that's open to wonder, that's open to new things, that's open to excitement, and doesn't experience that hate, that doesn't experience that colorblind, or that are colorblind. They don't see race, creed, color, sexual orientation. They see none of that. They just see what's in your eyes. And that is what is so cool about the kids at camp.
Innocence.
To me, that's the most special thing. You are very, very blessed to have Haley.
And quite honestly,
I'm glad.
Quite honestly, it took me a while to figure that out, and once I did, it's been smooth sailing,
Yeah, I think we're all that way. We get blessed, but we just don't know it. It takes us a while to figure it out that was the plan. And I see where we're supposed to be. I got it.
You mentioned your dad a couple times. I want to make two questions related to your dad. First of all, what has he said to you about having more grandkids at his age and you kids at your age? What is his? I can only imagine. Think some of the comments he's maybe made, but I want to hear them.
So you got to get that. You got to understand how my dad is. Number one, he's 85. Okay, he's 85. Okay, so he read my book also, and his first comment, and he enjoyed it. Eventually, we got around to what really mattered. But his first comment was, "You should have let me read it first, and I would have corrected all the mistakes." Okay, so that's what you get from your dad. You know what I mean? Yep. He's going to set you straight. Here's the funny part about my dad is that with the kids. So I have nieces, and listen, I've got grandkids that are close to the same age as my kids. Mm-hmm. And I've got grandkids that are my nieces and nephews have children that are younger or this same age. So my dad at 85 can't figure out which ones are grandkids, which ones are great-kids, and how they all flow together. And so we were at Christmas. This is fascinating. I want to tell you this. 1992 when my dad retired. Okay, 92, 93, right? We had a photo taken at my dad's house. And it was my mom and dad and all of us and all of our kids. Okay, and we took the race car, put it in front of his house. We all put on Richard Petty Fan Appreciation Tour T-shirts, still selling, always selling, man, always selling, hustling T-shirts. So we had this photo taken, and there were 18 of us in front of this car, around this car and in front of the house. So this past Christmas, as COVID began to become a thing that we could all get back together, he wanted everybody to come, and we wheeled that 92 Pontiac over there to the house again, parked it in exactly the same place, and we all gathered around it. And Adam wasn't there. My mom's not there anymore. But there were 42 of us this time. 42 of us. And that to him is the greatest picture that he's ever had. Now, he can't tell you whether they're grandkids or great-grandkids. I will say that. But that's his legacy. And he says that. He's like, when I'm gone, you're what people will remember by me. About me. Yeah, they'll remember I won a few races or I won a championship or two, and that's the way it was, and this is what I did. But in the end, you and your sisters and the grandkids and the great-grandkids, that's how he wants to be remembered, and that was a pretty cool moment.
Last question, another question about your dad.
Well, I got questions.
One of the things, but just 1 minute. I haven't talked to Kyle in a while. Stand by.
Clearly, I feel like I'm in on a phone call.
Something that I've always...
I'm eavesdropping here. I'm sorry.
Something that I've always wondered but never asked. And one thing that's a pet peeve of mine, and I got to tell you, my brother does this over the years too. This irritated me. Signing autographs. Drivers, a lot of them would run by and sign autographs. My brother did it, and there's no way in hell that person, when they scribbled it on the book or on the shirt or the hat, the time they got home, they would know who it was, because it's kind of one of these running little scribbles. But you and your dad both have the best, most complete, detailed signatures in all of NASCAR. And your dad, I very see him do a walking, when he signs an autograph, most time he's going to stop and give that person his attention, but you guys both sign, and it's all the details with the dot and the, all cross the T's, right? Yep. Is that something that you got from him, or what started it from him?
Yes.
Or whatever? Because every Richard Petty and every Kyle Petty autograph I have, it's unmistakable. And a lot of guys, to me, if you're going to take time to sign an autograph, take time to sign an autograph. And you and your dad done that. So what's the history of that? It's got to be something.
Yeah. Here's a little bit of the history. My granddad was the same way. If you ever saw my granddad's name, you could read it perfect. So my dad said that when he first started, that he was just so excited to be a race car driver. And working for my granddad, nobody had ever asked him for an autograph. But he was just so excited to be a race car driver that he was bound and determined that when someone come up, they had bought a ticket. So he was going to repay them by giving them something that they could look at and say, I met that guy one time. I know who that guy is. You know what I mean? So he practiced. I mean, he worked on it. He practiced hard to figure out what it was, to get it. Now, at the same time, a lot of his first races, and he will be very clear on this, there were only 500 or 600 people in the grandstands, and only about 6 of them wanted his autograph. So it sounded good at the time. Okay, fast forward to 92, when there's 100,000 people in the grandstand, it's not as good an idea as what you thought it was 50 or 60 years ago. But when I came along, here's the way racing was explained to me. And I've tried to explain it to people. I explained it to Adam this way, it's a circle. I want to drive a race car. I need money, so I look for a sponsor. The sponsor needs to sell products, okay? So who buys the products? The fans. Fans buy the products so I can ride the race car, so they spend the money. I help them sell the product. Fans buy, and it just goes around in a circle. So if you're nice to the fans, you're going to have a ride. That's how simple it was. That was his mentality. If you are nice to the fans. The other thing that Richard Petty is, and I will go to my grave saying that when he gets to heaven, what St. Peter's going to say is, here comes the world's biggest race fan, because that's what he was. He was just a race fan. From the time he went to that first race at 13 years old and watched his dad race, and then watched Buck Baker and Joe Weatherly and the Flock brothers and all those guys that came along in the 50s, he was just a race fan. He just happened to be a race fan that got to drive race cars. And that's kind of the way I grew up too. And you know, I see guys, I know you do it. people will come up and they'll hand you a book and it'll have 15 autographs on it, and I can't make out any.
And none of them.
I don't know who they are. And you get them on Twitter. Does anybody know whose autograph this is? No idea. And so he always looked at it that way. That was something. If a fan wanted something from you, you should give them a piece of you, and not just a mark on a piece of paper. You should give them a piece of you. And that's kind of the way we've always looked at it and always approached it. And to this day, I quit signing numbers. I'll say that. When I first started, I put 42. Then I went to Felix and I put 42, and drove my own car and I put 44. But when I started driving Adam's car, that was his number. So you can tell an autograph from Kyle Petty from the time after Adam's accident. For the last 20 years, I've never put a number beside my name because that was Adam's number. I don't go back to my 42 or back to my 44 because they weren't my numbers anymore. They were somebody else's.
So yeah, I've been writing down questions while I'm listening.
You get one. You get one, then I get two more. Then we got. He's got 14 kids to tend to tonight.
I get it.
You're good, man. You're good.
Well,
I told you it's your night. Your night, man.
Awesome. We're going to be here all night. This is going to be a marathon. So I was remembering how I wanted my room colored Petty blue. And there's a story about how Petty blue came about in the book. I'm not going to spoil it. But my dad went to Sherwin-Williams, and this guy, you couldn't find Petty blue on a card for an interior, painting for a guy's room. And there was this one guy at Sherwin-Williams that said, I can make it. And he got pretty close. And then, then I found out actually how it was made. But one thing I read in the book that kind of struck me, and I don't think you went into it as much, and I don't know if I'm asking something that we don't go too deep into. But ultimately, you were part of Petty Enterprises, then you left. You went to the Wood Brothers, Felix Sabatis. You had success. Driving for the Wood Brothers, that's so awesome. And I remember that. And then he came back, and, you were the CEO and left for a while, and came back. And at some point, Petty Enterprises was sold. And you mentioned it a little bit in the book that you weren't a part of that suddenly you were not a part of Petty Enterprises, your family business. And it felt like, and believe me, a lot from your words can be felt on how you're feeling, but it just felt like, you weren't happy about that. That felt like that there wasn't either closure or you didn't like how that went down. If you feel like just kind of telling us how that came about and how it made you feel. That to me was really just, if I had an unanswered question that seemed like I wanted to know more from the book, it was how you were feeling, how that came about. And that must have been tough.
That's in volume 2.
All right.
Okay. So you got to buy the next book.
Will that be a long sentence? That's going to be one heck of a sentence.
Okay, I'm kidding. So here's what happened. I touch on part of this in the book a little bit, like you say. So I drove I started driving at Petty Enterprises. And this is one thing that a lot of people don't remember is we were Chrysler, we were Plymouth, we were Dodge. But man, Dodge didn't have a car. When they came out with that Dodge Magnum in the late 70s, that was not much of a race car. I won the ARCA race with it, but that's about the only thing it ever did. So we went to Chevy. We switched to the GM products. And we had fallen on a couple of hard years. And my dad was a little bit older. 40, what would he have been at that time? 43, 44, right along in there. And STP had pulled back their money. If you go back to the Daytona 500 that he won in 79 with the big wreck, it's not got an STP on the hood and the quarter panels. It's got a couple of STPs on it, but it's not an STP car as I grew up with. And as
I've never paid attention to that.
You assume.
Yeah, most people, that's right. Most people just assume it. But that was hard times. But we won those races, and we were back in the game for a little bit, for at least a couple of years. I left Petty Enterprises because we were about to fall out of the game again. And my dad, we sat down and talked about it, and he said, one of us has got to go. And you're not good enough to get another job, so I'm going to go. And he left me at Petty Enterprises. And I ran it for a year or so, and then had the opportunity to go to the Wood Brothers, and he said, you got to go there. You got to go there. And we kept Petty Enterprise open and run Dick Brooks, and we run some races out of it just to keep the legacy alive and keep it going. And then my dad came back. But I went to Felix, like you said. I left Felix specifically, and for the only reason is because I felt like I needed to give Adam a place, because my granddad gave my dad a place. My dad gave me a place to start. I had to give Adam a place to start. And that's the only reason I started my own team. And then I came back. And I came back and I brought all my stuff back to Petty Enterprise eventually in like 99, 2000, right along in there. And then when my dad sold the place, he just sold it. And it was his place to sell. It was his place to sell. But I was hurt. I was PO'd because I had brought my team back and put it in with your team, and you're not even acknowledging that I gave you anything for that team. You know what I mean? And as far as I was concerned, I was going to drive a race car, and at some point in time, I was going to own a race team, and this is what we were going to do. And you realize at that point in time, that's not going to happen. And it's not, and this is the part that people struggle with. Okay, so I will say this, that this is the part that people struggle with. Well, were you mad at your dad? I was never mad at my dad. I was mad at my dad, the business guy, but not at my dad. Not at my dad. There's a huge, you got to understand that I grew up as Richard Petty's son, and then I worked at the shop, so I worked for Richard Petty. Then I was part of Richard Petty's pit crew. I carried tires. I hung bodies. I was a mechanic. I worked on his car. I was part of his team. And then one day I woke up and I was Richard Petty's teammate. And I got to drive right along Richard Petty in a Petty Enterprises car. And then I left and I was a competitor to Richard Petty. And I started my own team and I was an owner that was a competitor of Richard Petty's. You know what I mean? And then I come back and we're business partners. And then we're back to being father and son again. So I've dealt with Richard Petty in so many different ways and from so many different angles that some kooky way I could separate that in my head. That the guy that sold the race team was Richard Petty, the businessman that I was mad at. But Richard Petty, my father, I was never mad at. I love him more today than I've ever loved him, and loved him then. That was never an issue. So people wanted to put that in there, that was like, man, you got to be mad at him. You're not speaking to him. We never did not talk. To the day my mom passed away, I called my mom. It's a Southern thing. I called my mom every day to check in just to see how she was and how life was going. But yeah, I was hurt. I was more hurt than I was anything. And that was something in this book that I just wasn't ready to go into. Okay. Like I said, I was going to be as honest at 60 as I was going to be, and that's about as honest as I could be right
What
now.
was your, obviously a couple weeks back, Eric Jones went back to Victory Lane in Darlington, and I choose to look at the positive side of things. Any connection with Petty, Richard Petty, Petty Enterprises, getting back to Victory Lane at a place like Darlington is great. But then some people are going to say, well, it's really not Petty anymore, this, that, and the other. Congratulations, first of all, I don't give a damn what nobody says, to win a race with the size of that team compared to some they're racing against and all this other things. It's a hell of an accomplishment. But how did you view the Petty car, or Petty affiliated car, going back to Victory Lane, and what did your dad think about it?
Man, he was ecstatic. I talked to my sister earlier, and we were talking about that same thing earlier this evening, and she said he still hadn't come down from it. You can just hear it in his voice. You know what I mean? You can just hear it. And I look at it different than my sisters look at it, and I will say that, is Petty Enterprises was started. Petty Enterprises was started in 1946, 47, right along that. My granddad was racing and had run a few races before NASCAR ever came about, because there was stuff. But Petty Enterprises as a company was started back that long ago. We raced until 2006 or 7 out of Level Cross. That was Petty Enterprises. They moved to Charlotte, and that was no longer Petty Enterprises. Then it became Richard Petty Motorsports, Gillette Evernham, Richard Petty, whatever it, and it's always had that tie and that association, but it's no longer Richard Petty, or it's no longer Petty Enterprises. You can't, in the classic 6 degrees of separation almost, you can't connect what is Petty Enterprise, what is Petty Motorsports now and Petty GMS to Lee Petty or to anybody. That chain's been broken. But having said that, the 43 is Petty through and through. The 43 will be Richard Petty forever and ever till the end of time in this sport. It's a funny thing how people lock up on numbers. But to so many people, just like the 3 to so many people will always be Earnhardt. To me, the 3 is Cotton Owens, because that's who I grew up with. Buddy Baker drove the 3 car. See, Richard Childress drove the 3 car. Earnhardt made it famous, but it was already in my heart. It had already been tattooed, man. That's the way it was. But to so many people, that 43 still continues to be tattooed in their soul with Petty beside of it in some way, shape, or form. It may not be Petty Enterprises. It may be Gillette Petty Motorsports. It may be RPM Richard Petty Motorsports. It may be Petty GMS. But there's a Petty somewhere beside that. So I was extremely happy. Just like I am, listen, when that Wood Brothers car in that 21 goes to victory lane or comes close, man, I bleed that. I bleed that candy apple red and that pearl white, man. And with those gold numbers, that's I still love that thing more than anything in the world too.
And that was my dad's favorite car, favorite team forever. So we were at Emerald Isle at Carteret Speedway. I was in the motor coach.
Hey, Bill's getting to it. We own an open wheel modified team together.
No.
That Ryan Newman drove for us. We won the race coming back, the first race back at North Wilkesboro. He wants to offer you a ride in the car, but I'm
sounds like you just did. Sounds like you did it this time.
I handle the finances of Sadler Stanley Racing.
I'm in charge of the podcast. That's why it's such a failure. And he's bringing home the checker flag and trophies. No, see, I might have gone there at the end.
I was just going to ask him for a slight look. He's got these kids in diaper. I was just going to ask him for a friendly family slight discount to his asking price. That's all. Go ahead.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, you can negotiate that. I'm not getting in the middle of that. I'm just wanting a commitment.
Okay.
But so we were there. We got a motor coach. I take my family to the racetracks, and we're sitting there watching. And we don't have satellite TV. You have to, do the digital. And as I was dozing off, came on the show with Kyle Petty. He's eating food and interviewing guests. And all of a sudden I was like fascinated. And I just started reading the book too. Just fascinating, this interview that he does. And I can't remember the title of the show, but I want to find out where I can find it. It was on some like Works Network or something. And it's him having in-depth conversations with people. They eat somewhere great, and then they drive around in a car.
Yep.
Tell us about your TV show so that I can go find it again, because I watched it and then couldn't find it again. And I kept, there are like 72 channels that you can find on digital TV, and I couldn't find it again. So tell us about that if you don't mind.
Okay, this show also came about during the pandemic. You know how, so I'm sitting at home during the pandemic, got nothing going on, trying to write a book, but really, you're bouncing off the walls. And I'm thinking, man, I need a new TV show. I got to come up with something. So the name of this show is Dinner Drive. Dinner Drive is the name of the show.
I'm writing it down.
And it's on the Circle Network. You can also see it on Peacock. They stream it on Peacock. But it's on the Circle Network. Comes on Thursday nights. They're re-airing the series right now, this season. So the premise of the show, and we were talking about Rutledge and talking about people before, and there's just so many car shows out there, so many hot rod shows, so many street rod shows, so many all this. So the premise is to make it a little bit about a car or about transportation, just the first segment. And the question is, what's your most sentimental car? Not what's your baddest to the bone car, not what's your most expensive car. What is a car that as you were growing up, today, whatever, that brings back memories for you, that brings back something that makes your heart feel warm because you say, man, I love that car more than anything. And that was the fascinating part. So I started calling people that I knew. Calling people. I started going through my Rolodex first to get people. So, and I'll tell you this, I did Dale Jr. first because he lives up the road. And I knew if we messed up the first one, he would let us film it again.
Yeah.
So Dale Jr., his most sentimental car is an 88 S10 pickup, a 1988 S10 pickup that his dad brought home from the dealership one day and said, here, drive this. And that's what he drove. And that was his most sentimental car. The first year I did my dad, I did Junior, I did Mario Andretti, I did Herschel Walker.
Kyle's Rolodex is better than mine.
Seriously. Yeah. Would you like to join a podcast?
I did Herschel Walker. I did Ric Flair. I did Davis Love III. I did Darius Rucker, and I did Pitbull. And it was fascinating. Pitbull, okay, Mr. Worldwide, owns a cup car now and all this. His most sentimental car was a 1976 Ford Pinto.
Wow.
Okay, because his family came from Cuba. His parents came from Cuba. He lived in Miami, and the projects, and no air conditioning. His mom would get him up in the middle of the night, him and his brothers and sisters, and ride him around with the windows down in the streets of Miami, listening to music and listening to Tony Robbins cassettes, motivational cassettes, that you can be something in life, you can do something, to keep them cool and let them sleep so they could go to school the next day. That was his. Ric Flair's was a 65 Dodge Dart. You know what I mean? Darius Rucker's was an early 70s Carmen Ghia. So you start looking at Mario Andretti was a 1944. This story fascinated me. Mario Andretti lived in a part of Italy that after World War II became, I want to say it became Croatia, or it became another country. So they were displaced from his homeland where he was born and sent to a refugee camp in Tuscany, Italy. And he lived in a refugee camp in Tuscany, Italy for 7 years, behind a fence in a refugee camp. Know that. And the doctor that would come to the refugee camp, the adult males and some of the women would leave the camp every day and go to work, but they had to come back to the camp and check in. But the car that came and brought the American doctor to their camp was a dark blue 1940 Ford, and he fell in love with that car. And when their family moved to America when he was 15, it was mid-50s, and his dad went and bought a 1940 dark blue Ford because that was the car that they remembered and represented America to them. And you look at that, and that's such an incredible story. You know what I mean? That Mario Andretti came from a refugee camp to be Mario Andretti, and America meant so much to them. So then you sit down, and that's where you learn the story of the car and the story of who they are. So that's been cool. This year, and I'll bust through this. This year we did Daryl Hall.
That's who I saw.
John Rich. Excuse me. John Oates. I did John Oates. Didn't do Daryl. Did John Oates, John Rich. Golly, man, we did the Avett brothers, Lyle Lovett. I did Joe Gibbs, Jeff Gordon, Darrell Waltrip. Darrell could be his own season. I did Darrell. And I did Scott Hamilton, the Olympic gold medalist, the ice skater, and Shawn Johnson, the Olympic gymnast.
Yeah.
So it's been just a wide. It's just people
Shawn Johnson's one of the very few people that I got to interview on my time on TV that I was taller than. One of the very few.
That's right. Yeah, that's amazing. But it's just been a lot of fun because through. You learn so much about them just sitting down and having a meal. And we go to a place that they want to go, you know? So a lot of times it's just a local dive, you know what I mean? It's just, and which makes it even more fun. But it's been extremely interesting to see. I think we all, and we can all say this. You look at other people's lives and you think, man, they had it easy. They just breeze right, and they're superstars, and they never had to do anything. You know what I mean? And then you start talking to these people, and they've all overcome horrendous, just insurmountable obstacles to be who they are today. And you get that spirit from that. You know, you get that, you understand that, and it's been a fun program to do. And I tell people all the time, and Hermie, you can appreciate this. I tell people this all the time. I get to write the questions and ask the questions I want to know. And and I tell people this all the time, if you don't like my questions, I don't care because they're my questions and it's my show and I want to know the answers to those questions.
Exactly how Hermie feels about his questions on the show.
Yeah, that's exactly
Dinner
right.
Drive,
That's
Circle
exactly right.
Network, also on Peacock. Okay, and let me tell you, it was great. And it was John Oates, and he recounted his connection to racing as well, which was just a fascinating conversation. And for some reason, I think he went to a barbecue joint or something like that, but...
Yeah, we did. We went to the Loveless, which is a place. But I got to tell you this, Hermie. John Oates, okay? How old are you,
52. Hall & Oates. Yeah.
52. Yeah. Okay, so John Oates, at the height of his career, in the early 80s, 82, 83, 84, 85, right along in there, had a factory IMSA Pontiac deal and was a factory driver for Pontiac.
That's
on the
exactly
IMSA circuit.
right.
Yes. And it's like people just didn't realize that. People didn't realize that he was that deep into racing and that he understood racing. He was doing it on the side and showing it up. And he had a really bad wreck, and he kind of.
I believe that one, but do not try to tell me that Ric Flair was a race car driver in a Formula A.
No.
Ric Flair was tremendous. That's all I have to say is he let me wear one of his robes.
There you
End
go.
of the
Ric
conversation.
Flair was a
That
stewardess on
that
a
was
charter flight. That's what his claim to fame was. But yeah, and he talks about even how John Oates, how Hall & Oates came together. It's like he needed a place to stay or was staying at some guy's couch, and he and Hall & Oates started playing, and bang, what a great interview that was. And so my final question, although hopefully maybe you have a sentimental, you can do a show on, your sentimental desire to be in an open wheel modified with the number 22 or 39 on the side, riding around in a smart tour, maybe another race, but you and Hermie can work that out. I want to tell you how much this meant to me, and I wanted to communicate it if they haven't, but I know they have. I'm very close to the Wendell Scott family, Warwick and Frank and Mabel, and love them to death. And of course, I watched the interview that you did with them on another coffee table show kind of thing that you did. But they speak the petty praises when other people wouldn't give them a chance or not show them the equal respect. Your father, your family demonstrated an enormous love and respect for that family, even giving equipment to you all to Wendell Scott when he raced, and even a truck. I think they tell a story to me about how they got one of the petty haulers back in the day, that you guys went out of your way to show love, admiration, and respect to Wendell and his kids, who were his pit crew members, and that meant so much to them. And he's one of my heroes, one of Danville, Virginia's heroes, and that meant a lot to me. So I wanted to thank you about that, and perhaps you reflect on that just a little bit here before Hermie takes over and asks the rest of his questions.
Yeah, so you know what? It is that, and thank you, because they were a great family. And I grew up. Listen, we grew up at a time when everybody parked in the infield. You just pulled in the infield. You parked. You ate chicken and country ham biscuits and had a cooler full of Coca-Cola and stuff. And everybody would park side by side. And more times than not, we would park beside Wendell and his family. And my mom felt that she needed to be there with Wendell, with Wendell's wife and with the kids. Because you went into some places where, when you go back to 63 or 64, 65, 66, 67, and you're in the Deep South, we can rewrite all the history we want to, but it was not the best place to be for African Americans, for black families. And then you're going to a racetrack where it was just probably worse. But at the same time, my dad, if you talk to my dad and my granddad and those guys, I don't believe they ever saw Wendell's color. They just saw that he was a race car driver. Just like Cecil Gordon, just like James Hilton, just like John Sears, just trying to make a living, trying to do something for his family the same way they wanted to. They just were trying to do it. And they kind of traveled together. They would meet up and travel a lot of times together because nobody would mess with Wendell and his crowd when there were more teams around. And Earl Bomber and those guys, Earl Brooks, the Earl of Lynchburg up there. Earl Brooks did the same thing. He looked after Wendell, and it's not that Wendell needed looking after. It was just you needed a presence. You needed a presence back then. And Wendell would come down to the shop when I was a little boy. And it's funny you mentioned that truck, because when I went to Danville and did the interview, they took me over in the truck sitting behind the old shop.
Still got it.
That they worked in. Yeah. And it's sitting behind the old shop. I'd love to get that truck and restore it back to what it was, because in 1966 and then in 1967, I've got two pictures that are special to me. Is 66 is my first grade teacher and my first grade class, and we're standing beside that truck at my dad's race shop. And a race car sitting there with it. We went on a show and tell, and we went up to the race shop and just up there, and we stood beside that same truck that's sitting out beside Wendell's house. And when you look at, my sister did the same thing in '67. She was a year behind me. So that is a truck that, as you look through photos, from about 64 to about 60, well, probably 67, because we got a new truck in 68. And then my dad switched to Ford in 69. We parked all that stuff. But until 67, I think it was probably the last year, that truck shows up. That truck hauled Daytona winners. Wow. That was the truck, man. That was the truck. And when he was through with it and Wendell needed a truck, then they gave it to Wendell, and Wendell took it and used it until he finished his career in the early 70s. But there's a lot of connection there because there was a lot of respect there. And that's what the families have for each other. I think the respect bred into love for each other.
What a great symbol that is, the joining of the families together. I know Warwick and the family have been working on a Wendell Scott Museum. We're trying to maybe do it in Southside Speedway, where he was the track champion. Southside Speedway's extinct right now, but can be brought back to life. What a great, maybe you should reach out to Warwick and talk to him about it, because that is a great story, and I'd never heard that connection. That is something that they treasure, and it was symbolic to them of overcoming what was really a lot of obstacles, and it's always poignant, and especially through the Wendell Scott Foundation that Warwick chairs and works with kids in STEM and giving kids opportunities to break the cycle of poverty. That education was at the forefront in Wendell Scott's mind for his children. Every single one of them went to college. Most of them were educators, and really showed how perseverance and never thinking of yourself in any other way than being, I'm no better than any other man, but I'm no worse, can really change lives. And he has been just such an inspiration to me. Warwick is one of my great friends who I love dearly. So you ought to talk to him about that, especially.
I would love to. I need to call him and talk. And listen, that is a point, and that is the greatest point when I look at Wendell and look at that family, the educators that have come out of that family, and the educated individuals that came out of that family that have made a difference in other people's lives because of the things that they've done. Franklin, he's a phenomenal man, and just a phenomenal individual. And that part amazed me, because I look around at the other people that raced against him during that time, and they didn't send their kids to college. No. Their kids didn't go on to do other things. But Wendell had a focus for his family and a dream for his family.
Every single member of the Scott family is an inspiration in their own right, in their own way. Yeah. It changed lives in their own way.
Yep.
Frank, basketball coach, mentor. You're talking Warwick. At Warwick, just everything is a possibility of making things better for others in his mind. You're talking about Frank Jr. He's a teacher in Richmond, Virginia. Love that family. Mabel, educator forever. Just a great family. So thank you for that moment in memory.
Yeah.
That meant a lot. And I could get the Scotts to come to a race if you were driving an open wheel modified for the Sadler Stanley race team.
Here we go.
You could maybe get the truck.
Look, I'm gonna call Rutledge tonight after we get off. I'll call his manager, Rutledge.
Listen, I'll drive it. I'll drive it. I just don't know why you want a 62-year-old guy driving your car. I understand a 62-year-old guy driving you to the racetrack. I can do that. I can chauffeur you, man. I'll get my Uber license. I'll do that. I'll drive your car too, though. Don't worry, man. I've only driven one. Listen, I've only driven one modified in my whole life. In 1982 or three or four, I ran. They ran a turkey. They called it the Turkey Derby. And they ran at Wall Stadium in New Jersey. And I'm hanging on to the steering wheel. This is a true story. I got the steering wheel, and this thing's got more brake than anything I've ever driven in my life, because I've never driven anything but cup cars, and the ones I got had drum brakes on the rear. That's how long ago it was. And I'm hanging on the steering wheel, and come off turn 4 at Wall Stadium, and there's a wreck going in turn 1, and I hit the brakes. This thing stopped. It just stopped.
You got run into from behind.
Ray Evernham was driving. He hit me from behind, Hermie. I promise you. He hit me from behind, and he hit me so hard my hands flew off the steering wheel, and I punched the glass out of the tack. It broke the glass in the tack. And I grabbed the steering wheel real quick and kept running, and I went and got Ray when it was over. And I didn't even know Ray. I just knew him, that he did some IROC stuff at the time. and drove a race car up there. And I said, man, you owe these guys a tack, dude. You hit me so hard, I knocked the tack out of the car. It's not my car.
Do you still want him to drive? Do you still want him to drive for us?
Oh, yeah.
I think he's trying to talk you out of it.
No, that's great. And you asked the question, why would you want a 62-year-old man to drive your open-wheel modified car of the Sadler Stanley race team? And I'm going to answer you in the same way that Hermie Sadler told me that you were coming on this show this week. Because it's Kyle effing Petty. That's why we want you to drive.
I thought my days were over too.
Yeah.
And Senator Stanley, we're of course friends, and he's a legislator here, but
and your lawyer.
And my lawyer. Well, you were until we. Let me tell you what this guy did. This guy's going to be my friend. So I said, friend. I'm getting older and got kids and working on things. So I invited my attorney and friend to my estate planning meeting with my wife and kids.
First mistake.
A couple weeks ago to iron out all these things so we can move on with our lives and get everything so I would feel better about things. This friend, once he reads all my documents and my prenup agreements and all that, gets up in the middle of the meeting, leaves me and goes and sits down beside my wife and says, well, I'm representing Angie now.
I see where the bread and the butter are.
Yeah,
that's why I'm the smartest lawyer you know.
But Bill talked me into last year, which was really ended up being the beginning of Sadler Stanley Racing. His law firm up at Motor Mile Speedway in Pulaski. He sponsored the modified race, the Smart Tour race that Chris Williams is involved in. He said, Hermie, you got to drive. I said, Bill, my driving days, I just, he's very persuasive as a lawyer and very persuasive as you can tell about people that drive the car. So I agreed to drive the car.
Well, I got you drunk that night.
Well, when we were talking about it, not before I'd raced.
No.
I got that.
We had this condo in Wintergreen, several adult beverages in, and I agreed to do a whole bunch of shit. But anyway, so I go to Motor Mile and drive the modified, and be happy to know that my only injuries were suffered from getting in and out of the car. I bruised every rib I had on this side of my body. You'd have thought Mike Tyson had 9 rounds with me, just body blows. But it did blossom eventually into Sadler Stanley Racing, and we've got 3 brand new modifieds, and Ryan Newman drives for us, and he's won, and then Jonathan Brown won at Franklin County, which is in your backyard.
And at Whitey Taylor's place. So
and we still didn't get paid, did we?
I don't know.
From
there
Whitey?
was a dispute, actually. I got a call at midnight because they were standing at the pay window and they weren't paying. So we had to, I had to use my lawyer hat on that one. But, the funny thing was, and I'll just tell you this, Kyle. So there's oil on the track. They stopped the whole race for a while.
This is when I'm racing.
Down. Yeah, when you're racing, right? When you're at the Motor Mile and Hermie's in the car. Every other driver, because it's a while, gets out of the car. Hermie's not getting out of the damn car. Hermie would not get out of the car. And why wouldn't you get out of the car, Hermie?
It wasn't. I couldn't get out of the car.
he said
no way.
I don't think I'll be able to get back in it. I don't think
it's really embarrassing to try to put something this,
little bit bigger than 13 inches.
Into a 12-inch opening. Look, I want to ask you real quick 2 more questions, and we'll let you go. I want to get your thoughts on racing this year, who's going to win a championship. But I've realized through this entire podcast that Kyle forgets nothing. He remembers everything, dates.
That could be dangerous for you.
We were at a dinner one night. For years and years and years, every Tuesday, I did the John Boy and Billy show. I'd come in from the TV or racing and I'd go record on Monday for Tuesday. And so I got to know through the years Robert D. Rayford. And another thing my friend is trying to get me to do over alcohol is run for Senate of Virginia. We're not going to talk about this on this podcast, but
it's a great idea. I have nothing but great ideas, by the way.
Robert D. Rayford, I became friends with him on the John Boy and Billy show. Well, we were at a dinner one night with a bunch of people back when you and I were together at the Speed Channel back in those days, and you tried to tell me a story or some kind of story about Robert D. Rayford being on y'all's charity ride one year, and y'all were delayed leaving the hotel one morning because, quote unquote, they couldn't get him out of the bathtub.
Yes.
Now, did I dream that up?
Nope, you did not. So here's what happened. So here's what happened.
Do you know who
This is
Robert D. Rayford was?
I do.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so Robert D. Rayford, he was coming. He'd go on a ride with us, and Robert was an incredibly smart man. An incredibly smart man. He was a curmudgeon. Okay, on the radio especially, but he was just a good guy. And so he would ride, and he'd gotten a little older, and he would do hits from the road for John Boy and Billy. So anyhow, we're in Golden, Colorado. I know exactly where we're at. And here's the deal, because we're in Golden, Colorado, because it is the next day, the day we're going to leave, it is the day it's the first day that Herschel Walker is going to be on the ride. This was his first ride that year. So that was back in maybe late 90s, early 2000s. I don't know, somewhere. Anyhow, so Robert's wife had packed Robert these two containers, these two Tupperware containers, cylinders. One had like a body soak in it. So you just sprinkle a little bit in the tub, and you sprinkle a little bit in the tub and just soak, and it takes the soreness out of your muscles. And we stay at some really nice hotels. Okay, we stay at a lot of the hotels we stay at are like 4-star. It's nice places. And she packed another one with Metamucil to keep him regular. Okay, so somewhere in Robert's travels, by the time we got to the second or third day and we were in Golden, Colorado, Robert was pretty sore, so he put Metamucil in the tub instead of putting the soak in the tub. Well, Metamucil, if you put it in water, it becomes like silicone. I mean, it's slick as crap, dude. I mean, you can't move. So Robert's in the tub and can't get out of the tub.
I thought for sure you had made this whole damn story up.
No, Robert can't get out of the tub because
do that again. How's he getting out of the tub again? What's he doing?
Robert's doing this, trying to get out of the tub. There's water going there. So we're staying at one of those fancy ass hotels where there's a phone in the bathroom. Okay, so Robert finally decides, he pulls down some towels from behind him after he's been in the tub forever, and he pulls down some towels and he wets them, and he just starts flicking them at the phone across over on the other side of the commode, because he's in the tub, and so finally he can't reach it, so he just wads one up and throws it, and it knocks it off the receiver. It knocks it off. Well, then it's just a dial tone. Forever, it's just a dial tone. And he said he sat there, and finally, it's like somebody realized the phone was off, and they broke in. And Robert said he could faintly hear somebody saying, "Can I help you?" And he was like, "I'm trapped in the tub. I'm trapped in the tub." So they called Diane Huff, who was running the ride at that time, and wanted to know who was in that room. She told them, and they said, "Well, we're having an issue," and he says he's trapped. And she just panicked. Diane just panicked. You know what I mean? So security comes up. They have to break in the door because he's got the thing on the door and all this stuff. So they have to open the door and saw that off, to get in the tub. And Robert's just laying in the tub because he can hear him coming now. So he knows he's rescued. He knows he's rescued, man. So true story. He was trapped in the tub for like 3 or 4 hours. He said he kept draining some, and he said his first thought was drain it and it'll all go out, but it just left that film in the tub, and he was probably in his mid-70s. He couldn't get out of the tub.
Good part of the story was he was regular the rest of the trip.
Yeah. Yes. Wait a minute. Okay, same trip. I didn't tell you this part. So same trip. We're coming through Arkansas, and we left the hotel. We're hauling the mail, and and we get to the gas station, and we're gassing up, and people come through, and you're filling them up. And all of a sudden, I hear a motorcycle, and we've been there probably 45 minutes at that time. And I hear a motorcycle, and I look, and it's Robert. And he pulls right up to the gas pump where I'm standing. And I put the nozzle in, and I'm filling him up because that's the way we do it. One person fills up this side, and one person. So you put a different person at every pump. So I said, "Did you oversleep?" "Nope." I said, "Well, what happened?" He said, "Kyle, when you get my age, there's certain things you just got to do when you got to do it." And he said, I'm coming down the road and I got to go. And he said, and there's no place. Now, Robert's got to be 76, 77 now. And he says, I saw an old folks home. And he said, I pulled my motorcycle right up to the front door. I got out. I got my license. I got a card from the radio station. And I said, I'm Robert D. Rayford. You probably heard me on the radio. And if you hadn't, it really don't make any difference. But I need to take a crap somewhere. So here's my license.
He gave him the ID at the door. Hold my ID.
Here's my license and here's my card. You can call and check on it, but you better point me in the direction of a bathroom. So they sent him down the hall to a bathroom. He went to the bathroom. He came out, got his card and his license, and he came on down and caught up with us. True story. True story, man.
Robert D. Boy, he was, and he had that voice too, that very distinct sounding voice. So look, we want to let you go, but before we go, just real quick, your thoughts on the season you've seen so far. What we really want to do is piss off the social media people so they'll come after you like they always do about what you say, which I know you enjoy. Focus on the Cup Series. What have you seen so far? So many first-time winners, but look in your crystal ball and tell us what we're liable to see by the time we get to Phoenix.
I have no idea, Hermie. I promise you, I've been around, like we started this conversation, I've been around a long, long time. I don't believe I've ever seen anything like this. I think they had 19 winners in 1972, which was phenomenal because they only ran 31 races. And at that time, and you didn't have multi-car teams. That's the fascinating part about that. That was 19 individual teams winning races, or 17 or 18. I think a couple of them were a double up. But when you look at that, that fascinates me. I think 2001 they might have been 19 winners. But what is fascinating this year is we've always known that they're good drivers when you get to the Cup level. These guys, Chris Buescher, Eric Jones, these guys are good drivers. They may not be with a powerhouse Gibbs or a powerhouse Hendrick, but they're good race car drivers. What's fascinating is the amount of owners and organizations. Trackhouse, you got they win a race. You've got Roush Fenway, Keselowski, RFK wins a race. Petty GMS wins a race. It's like these people are winning races. And the fascinating part, and this is why you can't nail down the championship stuff, is like if we take the top 5 from Bristol and we go to Texas, those guys may not run in the top 15. That's the fascinating part to me is you can win a race one week and not even be able to run in the top 20 the next week. How does that happen? I've never seen a time when guys, Denny Hamlin was non-existent the first of the year, goes to Richmond and wins, and then goes back to being non-existent again, and then he hits his stride. The 9 car of Chase Elliott has been in a stride, but they didn't show up the first 2 races of these playoffs. And so many people had trouble at Bristol, they ended up second. So does that mean they're back, or that so many people had trouble? I don't know. I don't. Christopher Bell seems to be peaking at the right time, and this is a sport of peaks and valleys. And if you can peak at the right time, then you're pretty good. Where has Kyle Larson been this year?
That's been a big
consistent basis.
Him and Harvick, more so Kyle, because Harvick's got the age and this and that, but Larson, that's just been a mystery.
And I felt like Harvick was kind of peaking at the right time. If you look at it, Harvick had won a couple of races. If we go to Darlington, he's running 4th or 5th when he catches on fire. If we go to Kansas, out there, it was early in the race, and I felt like he made a mistake by putting himself in a bad place early in the race and getting in that situation. But still, he was a top 6 or 7 car at that point in time in the race. And even at Bristol, he was decent. Mm-hmm. They just took themselves out with a bad pit stop, and they run the top 10. So I felt like, but there's nobody who has said, I'm the guy this year. Come chase me. Yeah. Come get me. In the last few years, we would refer to it as the big 3 plus who's going to be the 4th guy. Who are these guys going to be? This year, I don't know. I think the car has been a huge plus. I think the car has been a huge plus. Single source, suppliers, like it or not, and I'm not a big fan of it, but I think it has created some parody. I don't like parody. Sorry. I want to see somebody just kick your butt 6 ways from Sunday and then make you work harder to go chase them. I've always wanted to do that or like that part. But at the same time, I think Saturday night showed some weaknesses of the car. I think the steering issues. Remember when we used to, the power steering fluid would cavitate and you get and it just chatter like that. That's kind of what they were describing with the rack and pinion. It was doing the same thing, and so I think there's some weakness. I think the car is not as safe as it could be. I think we've heard drivers speak that, and especially since the Kurt Busch incident, you look at that and you think, how did that happen? Just backing into the wall. He backs into the wall qualifying. 2 hours later, a kid backs in windshield deep into turn 1 and drives it back into the garage area and gets out and goes home. You know what I mean? With no injury, because the old cars crush different. So I think there's some things like that NASCAR is going to have to keep looking at. But this has been the most bizarre year that I think I have ever experienced, either just being around the sport, not driving or anything, just being around the sport. Because I think guys show up at the racetrack and they get in the car and they go qualify. If they don't get practice, they just go qualify. And they either know they're going to be good or they know it's going to be a long day tomorrow. And there's no fixing it either way. And that's a strange place to be.
Well, it's going to be exciting all the way down to the end. And people want to complain and talk, but I really think NASCAR, just from watching and watching on TV, and the simple fact, to your point, that all these winners this year, and the parity and not being, it's bringing people to the racetrack. People are coming back out. And so we can complain about things all we want to, but if you love NASCAR racing, like I know you and I both do, you want the sport to be healthy. And I think it's healthier now than it has its problems. We've already, but healthier now than it was 2 or 3 years ago, 5 years ago.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Listen, the product on the racetrack is the best product that it's been in a long time.
Right.
When you sit down in the stands and you watch it, you actually see people race. You actually see people pass people, even though these drivers complain they can't pass. You see them drive from 20th up to 5th or 6th. They may not be able to pass those last 2, but by God, you don't pass those last 3 or 4 because they're fast. Right. They're good guys too. It gets tougher when you get to that end. But it is fascinating to watch the product on the racetrack because it is just it has been a great product.
Well, we'll be watching. Kyle, I can't thank you enough, for taking time. You and your whole family have always been good to my brother and I and our families. I have ultimate respect for you. You've always been fun to work with, fun to get to know, fun to race with. The Sadlers love the Petties, so I can't thank you enough for taking a little bit of time with us this evening. Thank you so much.
Yeah, man, love you guys too. And listen, just give me a couple days notice so I can order a new helmet.
Done and done.
I got to get a uniform. I got to get. I'm
just telling you,
it's
no bagging out now. It's no bagging out now. He's gonna go to dinner tonight and tell the people we've got Kyle effing Petty lined up for next year. Sign the papers. See, that's what it's gonna be.
Do it. And listen, you didn't even have to buy me a drink.
And that was a really good impression of me too. But thank you for your book. It's Swerve or Die: Life at My Speed in the First Family of NASCAR Racing by Kyle Petty. Go out and get it. New York Times bestseller, Amazon bestseller. I got it on Amazon, came right to my door in 2 days, and I couldn't put it down, I swear. And it's harder for me and what I do as a lawyer and a politician to read books. And my wife looked at me and goes, that book must be really good. Well, I took it off her nightstand this morning so I could drive up to Richmond, and she texted me and said, you took my book just a little while ago. And I said, I'm bringing it back. We were interviewing Kyle Petty. Ladies and gentlemen, Dinner Drive on the Circle Network. You got to see it. You can get all the episodes on Peacock. It was a wonderful episode that I saw, and I spent the rest of my vacation trying to find it again. Now that I know where it is, I'm going to go watch it all. What a bunch of interesting guests you got there as well. But thank you so much for that and for agreeing to ride the open wheel modified at the Sadler Stanley Race Team. Finally, we got a top tier driver.
We got him.
Yeah. Thank you.
We got him. Kyle, thank you so much. We appreciate you. We'll get you on again another time soon.
What a great interview. Probably I always say you've got great friends and everything like that, but the best ever to ever have one of the best people to ever have driven a race car, from a great family, a great person, Kyle Petty, and a great book. Guys, you got to read this book. Even if, look, it's not really a racing book, it's a family book. And that's probably what's most important to me, and that's what I got out of it. And so hopefully everybody can get that as well.
Well, Senator, this has been another fun one. And Kyle was great. I think we've covered some great issues on the leaning right and turning left moments as well. And I'm going to rank this one right up at the top. I hope our listeners and our viewers enjoy it. Yeah. And
what a great hour.
Everybody's been great.
Man, thank you for the honor of being able to talk to this guy. One of my heroes will always be, and really just learned so much about him through the book. And tonight we got to have him back on and just talk about maybe y'all's career in broadcasting, because that would be an interesting conversation.
Well, when he comes to I'm going to get with him, let him pick a race for next year to drive
we got
our car.
Three left in the Smart Series this year.
Cut you off right there and say we'll set up a time for him next year to pick a race, and we'll tape a podcast while we got him at the track.
Roger that. Okay. Yeah. Well, what a great podcast. I hope you've listened every single second and are enjoying it as much as we enjoy bringing it to you. You can go find us on our Facebook page, the Leaning Right, Turning Left podcast Facebook page. You can find us on the internet, www.sadlerstanleyracing.com. You can get the podcast and find out exactly what's going on with our race team. When you go to all the platforms, give us a 5-star rating. We really appreciate that, and tell your friends about it as well. We're selling merch, Sadler Stanley Racing merch, Jonathan Brown merch. You can find that on our Facebook page as well. And it's great hoodies, sweatshirts, T-shirts, stickers. We've got it all. So thank you all for listening. We really appreciate you every day. We've got a growing audience. It's really important to us. Thanks for listening to our message and our fun. And you all have a great and wonderful week. I'm Virginia State Senator Bill Stanley, and I am leaning right.
And I'm Hermie Sadler, and I'm turning left. This has been a fun one. Hope you enjoy it, and we'll see you back next week.